Welcome to Creative Thinking, Unlocking Your Inner Innovator, brought to you by Mindful Literary. Have you ever felt stuck, searching for that spark of inspiration? In this audiobook, we dive deep into the essence of creativity, offering you tools and techniques to awaken your inner innovator. Whether you're looking to enhance your professional skills, explore new artistic avenues, or simply think more creatively in your daily life, this journey is for you. From playful exercises to practical insights on overcoming creative blocks, we'll explore how to harness your unique potential and turn ideas into reality. Get ready to challenge the ordinary and discover the extraordinary. Let's begin. Chapter 1: Awakening the Innovator Within, Recognizing Your Creative Potential. It took me a long time to understand that creativity wasn't a magical trait reserved for the few. I often found myself watching my friend Alex, a graphic designer, as he effortlessly transformed the simplest ideas into stunning visual narratives. If there was anyone who embodied the art of creativity for me, it was Alex. He was the type of person who would doodle on napkins during our coffee breaks, and those doodles somehow ended up becoming the foundation for award-winning designs. But the spark of creativity isn't something that just appears out of nowhere. I began to look back at my own life and dig into the early signs that pointed me toward my creative potential. I remember my childhood art classes, sitting at a cramped table with spilled paint on the edges and the smell of clay dust lingering in the air. I'd watch as my fingers fumblingly transformed nothing into something: a lopsided pot, an abstract landscape. Unearthed from the rubble of oozing colors, I felt a little thrill each time I saw a piece take shape. Even then, I had inklings that I had something to offer. It was as if a dormant force was sitting patiently, waiting for me to recognize it. My experiences echoed conversations I had with Alex, who imparted his philosophy that creativity lies in the act of creating, not just in the finished product. As I connected the dots, I encouraged Alex to share his journey with me. One day, he recounted the story of that fateful doodle, the one that turned his life on its head. In the midst of a moment that seemed trivial, he sketched a whimsical character on a spare sheet of paper while waiting for a train. It was a simple rendering, a hybrid of whimsical and absurd, yet it sparked an overwhelming wave of ideas. What started as a harmless doodle morphed into an intricate design that he later showcased in a local art exhibition. The audience was captivated, and Alex was launched into the local creative scene, a path that had remained obscured for so long until that one moment of fearless expression. His tale nudged me to reflect deeper. What were the moments in my life that ignited those small flickers of creative light? Were they tucked away neatly in the archives of my past, just waiting for me to dust them off? It turned out that everyone has a reservoir of creativity, treasures waiting to be unearthed. But recognizing that potential isn't always straightforward. It sometimes hinges on viewing our experiences through a different lens, one that highlights rather than diminishes. I began to look at my friendships, my failures, and even my seemingly mundane experiences as fertile ground for cultivating my creative instincts. The more I thought about it, the more I understood that creativity isn't a competition, it's a personal journey. Each person's reservoir is unique, sculpted by their experiences, interests, and perceptions. If Alex's doodle had the power to open doors, what did mine hold? This realization brought both excitement and a tinge of fear. What if, in this exploration, I discovered not only potential, but also the shadows of doubt that lay in wait? The pursuit of creativity often involves an unsettling dance with vulnerability, a sensation I was beginning to grasp. By the end of our discussion, Alex's insights lingered in my mind, causing a whirlwind of questions to form. As I introduced the idea of drawing out our individual creative sparks, I suggested that readers start observing their own lives with the intent of discovery. I encouraged them to take a moment to reflect on an experience that made their hearts race, perhaps a passion forgotten, a project abandoned. I wanted to inspire them to confront the fear that can stifle their creativity and to unlock the potential hidden beneath. In returning home, I felt the tug of that lingering question: how deeply had I buried my own creative gifts? Perhaps it was time for a little exploration of my own. The blank pages of a fresh notebook beckoned, promising to reveal what had long been dormant, urging me to transform my insecurities into the strokes of creativity waiting to burst forth. The power of curiosity. When I think back to my childhood, my mind often wanders to those sun-drenched afternoons in my grandmother's attic. The way the wooden stairs creaked beneath our feet and the smell of mothballs mingled with dust created an atmosphere steeped in mystery. Emma and I would spend hours there, two mischievous explorers armed with nothing but our curiosity and a tattered flashlight. Each corner held a story, each box whispered secrets long forgotten, and every quiet creak of the floorboards seemed to invite us deeper into the adventure. It was in that magical space that we stumbled upon treasures that sparked our imaginations. We found vintage hats and feather bows that made us feel like we were in a glamorous bygone era. We unearthed yellowing photo albums that told tales of love and laughter, capturing moments my grandmother had lived through. I remember vividly the time we discovered an old trunk filled with letters, intimate correspondences that had not just slipped through the cracks of time but had been hidden, waiting to be reborn through our youthful interpretation. With our heads swirling with stories, we became the authors of elaborate scenarios, weaving the lives of strangers into our childish games. Reflecting on those afternoons, it's striking how curiosity acts as a catalyst for creativity. It draws us in like a whisper, urging us to ask questions, to dig deeper, and to explore. When we allowed our minds to roam free, we not only uncovered treasures, but also tapped into our own creativity in ways we never anticipated. This inherent curiosity is a superpower, one that many of us neglect as we grow older, too often allowing the mundane duties of adult life to stifle our imagination. Yet I believe deeply that recapturing that sense of wonder is vital. So I invite you to take a cue from my younger self, embrace that spark of curiosity. Grab a notebook and jot down questions that come to mind, no matter how trivial they may seem. Go for a walk in your neighborhood and take note of what catches your eye. What stories do those cracked sidewalks hold? What mysteries lie behind the curtains of the houses you pass? Invite that inquisitiveness back into your life, and I promise you, you'll be amazed by the treasures that await. As I continued to revisit my grandmother's attic throughout my childhood, I found myself craving the adventures that always seemed to lie just beyond the next box or trunk. Each visit became more layered and intense, the thrill of what might be discovered pushing us further into the unknown. One day, however, everything changed. We stumbled upon a locked chest, its iron lock rusted over. Something about that chest captivated Emma and me, drawing us in like a moth to a flame. We spent countless afternoons trying to pry it open, devising 100 different strategies, including makeshift tools made from discarded wooden toys and broken broomsticks. It awakened a kind of obsession in us, the need to unlock the mysteries it contained. What treasures lay inside? A lost fortune? Sentimental family heirlooms? An ancient diary filled with the musings of a long-gone relative? Our imaginations ran wild, and the anticipation of discovering what was behind that lock fueled our curiosity even more. But the quest to open that chest also created tension between us. Every once in a while, we would argue about how to approach it or who should take the lead in our efforts. Our friendship was strong, yet there was a subtle push and pull as our individual curiosities clashed against our shared goal. In those moments, I realized that curiosity, while a uniting force, also had the power to ignite conflict. It was a lesson in collaboration and compromise, and it taught us that our individual perspectives could enhance, not hinder, the quest for discovery. As we continued our attempts to unlock the chest, Emma and I learned not just about the treasures we sought, but about ourselves. We discovered the importance of patience and understanding, and how curiosity could bridge gaps, pulling us closer even when it threatened to drive us apart. Overcoming self-doubt. Self-doubt has always been my constant shadow, lurking around every corner, and it revealed itself most acutely during my college art exhibit. As I gazed at my pieces displayed under the harsh fluorescent lights, a wave of uncertainty crashed over me. Would they resonate with anyone? Would they see the intention behind the brushstrokes, the emotions I poured into each canvas? Questions swirled in my mind like angry bees. I stood in the corner of the room, a volcano of self-critiques rumbling within, one part of me eager for connection, while the other craved solitude and safety from judgment. It was there, amidst the echoes of chatter and the clinking of glasses, that I met Lucas, another artist whose work seemed to draw people in like moths to a flame. His confidence was palpable, yet I could see the tremors of vulnerability lurking beneath his charming facade. As we exchanged pleasantries, I mustered the courage to share my fears. To my surprise, Lucas nodded with an understanding that felt both comforting and liberating. "You're not alone in this struggle," he confessed. "There are days I look at my work and feel like an imposter, questioning my right to call myself an artist." His honesty was a balm for my wounded spirit, and for a moment, my self-doubt felt a little less isolating. Lucas began to share his own strategies for combating these insidious feelings. He talked about the importance of reframing negative thoughts, suggesting that instead of asking, "What if I fail?" we should pivot towards, "What if I learn something valuable?" It was a simple shift, yet its implications were profound. He encouraged me to document my journey, to write down my achievements, no matter how small, so I could visually track my progress. "And whatever you do," he added, "don't compare your journey to others. Each artist is on their unique path." His words felt like tiny torches illuminating the dark corners of my self-doubt. As the night wore on, I found solace in our conversation, and bit by bit, I began to peel back the layers of my insecurities. We exchanged stories of our creative processes, our triumphs and failures. He even showed me sketches that had once seemed so dreadful to him, works that he had hidden away in shame. I realized that self-doubt wasn't a monster to be vanquished. It was a part of the creative process that many artists wrestled with, that perhaps it could even be a catalyst for growth. But as the exhibit came to a close and the crowd began to dissipate, the old familiar grip of insecurity tightened around me. The final invitation to speak about my work loomed, and I felt my heart race. I wanted to share the emotional journey that fueled my creations, yet the thought of standing in front of a room full of critical eyes made my insides churn. Lucas caught my eye, offering a nod of encouragement. "Remember who you are," he whispered, as if sensing my internal turmoil. In that moment, I had a choice to make. Would I let self-doubt paralyze me, or would I rise, embrace my vulnerability, and claim the space I deserved? With a determined breath, I walked to the front of the room. Overcoming self-doubt began with the first step of sharing my story, I realized. My heart thundered in my chest, but as I introduced my pieces, revealing the emotions and inspirations behind them, a shift occurred. The audience leaned in, their faces reflecting curiosity rather than judgment. I was no longer the underserving artist in the corner. I was a participant in a shared experience, an artist learning to embrace every color of doubt and discovery. Perhaps it was time to transform my insecurities into fuel for my creativity. By the end of the night, I had not only conquered my fear of speaking, but had also built a connection in that humility with every listener. As I stepped down, I hugged a now familiar warmth of confidence. It was as if Lucas had handed me a key to unlock a hidden chamber in my heart, a place where creativity could flourish unfettered by self-doubt. And as we parted ways that evening, I couldn't shake the sense that this encounter was just the beginning of a journey toward a more fearless version of myself. Chapter 2: The Foundations of Creative Thinking. What is creative thinking? Creative thinking has often been stretched and contorted into something a bit too artsy or even nebulous. You might picture an artist daubing paint on a canvas or a musician lost in a melodic daydream. But as I discovered during our group project at university, a collaboration with my brilliant teammates Alex and Emma, creative thinking transcends the realm of artistry. It's a powerful tool for problem solving that we can apply in our daily lives, regardless of our field. When we embarked on our project, our approaches were anything but uniform. Alex had a knack for breaking down problems into sound bites, while Emma possessed the uncanny ability to think several steps ahead, weaving ideas into what could only be described as a tapestry of innovation. As for me, I thrived in the chaos, often throwing out wild ideas without worrying about their feasibility right from the start. Our varied approaches didn't just coexist, they harmonized, creating innovative outcomes that we hadn't anticipated when setting out. This diversity showed me that creative thinking is not merely about a talent for singing or sketching. It's about redefining problems, questioning assumptions, and daring to envision solutions that can seem ludicrous at first glance. As we navigated the challenges of our project, it was this willingness to explore the absurd that propelled us forward. For instance, when faced with an overwhelming amount of research data, Alex suggested we visualize our findings with a quirky infographic. Initially hesitant, I soon became captivated by the idea, and before long, we had crafted a narrative that was not only compelling, but also remarkably easy for our peers to digest. By interweaving our perspectives, we didn't just produce results, we transformed our way of thinking. And that's when it struck me. Creative thinking isn't merely a tool limited to our assignments, it can be integrated into our everyday experiences. Now, you might wonder how to bring this mind opening creativity into your life. Think about the problems you face daily. Approach them not as roadblocks, but as challenges to reimagine. Break them down as Alex did. Think ahead like Emma, and don't shy away from robust brainstorming sessions that yield off the wall ideas. The key lies in seeing possibility rather than limitation. This ability to pivot, to spark new avenues of thought despite the restrictions of convention, is the essence of creative thinking. As I walked away from that project, I realized that the true power of creative thinking is in its transformative potential. It can change the way we perceive challenges and solutions. It can breathe new life into stagnant ideas. Creative thinking is about welcoming ambiguity, embracing uncertainty, and finding that spark of joy in exploration. Anyone can do it. Yes, even you. As the tension rose during our project's final days, I felt a pulse of urgency that reminded me the magic doesn't lie in the outcome, but in the quest for it. And as we dove into our final presentation, each of us armed with our unique insights, I felt a wave of excitement wash over me. What we had created was not just a project, it was a testament to the power of creative thinking, ready to inspire others just as it had inspired us. The science behind creativity. It was a cozy Saturday afternoon when I found myself sitting across from Dr. Sarah at our favorite cafe, the smell of freshly brewed coffee wafting through the air. Sarah, a cognitive psychologist whose passion for the mind is matched only by her infectious enthusiasm, had become my go-to person for unraveling the mysteries of the brain. As we sipped on our lattes, I couldn't help but feel a spark of excitement about our topic of conversation, the neuroscience of creativity. What makes some individuals more creative than others? What is happening in our brains when those aha moments strike? As Sarah spoke, she described the fascinating interplay between two critical networks in our brains, the default mode network, DMN, and the executive control network, ECN. The DMN was like a daydreaming mechanism, active when we loosen our focus, allowing thoughts to wander and connect in seemingly random ways. In contrast, the ECN stepped in when we needed to evaluate those ideas critically, sharpening our focus and steering us down the right path. Imagine them like dance partners, she explained, where one leads in creativity and the other refines those wild moves into something more. When they collaborate well, that's where true creativity blooms. Our conversation then took a personal turn. I recounted a time when inspiration struck during a late-night walk, the world feeling hazy and magical around me. At that moment, ideas flowed effortlessly as I strolled through the park, the creativity unlocked by the tranquility of night. Sarah nodded knowingly, sharing her own experience of breakthroughs during mundane tasks, those moments when her mind was permitted to drift, making way for the dance of the DMN. Through our anecdotes, it became clear creativity often emerges from a place of freedom, not just in thought, but in feeling. But what about the role of environment and routine? It was as if I had struck a chord. Recently, I had read studies that showed how certain conditions could supercharge our creativity. Open spaces, natural light, and even the simple act of changing one's routine could significantly enhance our brain's ability to generate new ideas. Creating a nurturing environment is essential, Sarah advised, her eyes sparkling. It's like watering a plant. Sometimes all it needs is the right conditions to flourish. I reflected on my workspace at home. cluttered yet comfortable, and how I had often chided myself for not keeping it more orderly. Maybe it was time for a cleanse, physically and mentally. As our discussion deepened, Sarah began to share recent findings on neuroplasticity, the brain's incredible ability to rewire itself. This is the game changer, she emphasized. By engaging in creative activities, whether it's doodling during meetings or experimenting with cooking, we can build new neural pathways. I felt the thrill of understanding. Here was a treasure map to innovative thinking, one that I could navigate through practice and persistence. But of course, there were obstacles. Our own self doubt and fears of inadequacy could fasten heavy chains around our minds, locking away our creative potential. The lovely irony was, in the very attempt to set my creativity free, I sometimes felt trapped by my own expectations. The cafe grew busier, the clatter of cups and chatter of patrons enveloping us. I realized that despite the bustling noise around us, my mind had begun to race. What breakthroughs awaited if I truly committed to exploring this inner landscape of creativity? I was ready to dive deeper, to experiment, to embrace the messy and imperfect nature of this pursuit. Yet, there was a flicker of apprehension within me. Could I really overcome the fear of failure? Would I be able to push past the limitations I had so often placed on myself? Our conversation wove through myriad ideas, laughter momentarily brightening the weight of our exploration. But as Sarah's phone buzzed with reminders of the day ahead, I felt the tension swell within me. I realized that while knowledge about creativity was powerful, applying it was a different beast altogether, one that loomed before me like a shadowy figure waiting to be confronted. I glanced at Sarah, her face illuminated by her glowing screen, the spark of passion still evident in her demeanor. "You know," she said, glancing back up at me, "it's all about practice, iteration, and a sprinkle of courage. Don't let the fear hold you back. Let it fuel your fire." With those words, something shifted inside me, poised between action and hesitation. My heart raced at the thought of what lay ahead, the uncharted territories of my own creative mind, beckoning me to step beyond the confines of my comfort zone. I took a deep breath, ready to embrace the beautiful uncertainty of the creative journey, building a creative mindset. It's curious how the most transformative moments in life often sneak up on you when you least expect them. For me, that moment arrived wrapped in the warm and animated presence of Mrs. Rodriguez, my mentor. She was a kaleidoscope of ideas, infusing the air with a sense of possibility that felt contagious. I remember the afternoons spent in her quaint art studio, where vibrant paints spilled across the workbench and the sun kissed each canvas with warmth. It was there that I first learned to see challenges not as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities disguised in complex colors. Each session began with her trademark encouragement. "Look around you," she would say, gesturing to the once blank canvases now alive with reckless splashes of paint. "Each mark you make is a decision, a chance to transform what's there into something new." That was my first lesson in cultivating a creative mindset, recognizing the beauty and potential, harnessing the power of perspective. Little by little, I started to shift my thinking, crafting not just a new way of seeing, but a new way of being. As I grew, I realized the importance of creating rituals that nurtured this mindset. Every morning, I dedicated the first hour of my day to practices that would set the tone for my mind. I started with stretches, feeling my body awaken and my thoughts clear, followed by journaling where I could pen down my ideas, dreams, and sometimes even fears. It was here, with open pages, that I faced my inner critic and reshaped my narrative into something that mirrored optimism instead of doubt. The world became a canvas, and I was the artist, empowered to choose the colors of my thoughts. Perhaps one of my most transformative practices was the idea walk. Every Saturday, I ventured into the quiet park down the street, letting the hum of nature fill my senses. I learned to associate movement with creativity, letting my mind run free from the clutter of my daily routine. Each step became a stroke of clarity, ideas blossoming like wildflowers along my path. This special time with myself was crucial. It taught me that creativity thrives in openness, that pausing to notice the beauty around us can spark innovative thoughts. Yet, there were moments when it felt like I was being tested. A significant project at work loomed over me, filled with pressures that threatened to stifle my creativity. Mrs. Rodriguez had always whispered about looming deadlines and high expectations as merely shadowy figures in the background, intimidating yet manageable. Channeling her wisdom, I reframed my anxiety into an opportunity for growth. I started to document my thought patterns, capturing the ebb and flow of my creativity in a notebook dedicated to understanding my mental landscape. But as the project deadline closed in, a familiar tension gripped me, weaving its way into my morning routine. I could feel the weight of expectation, the shadows creeping back, threatening to engulf the colorful tapestries I had woven. I found myself staring blankly at the page, paralyzed by the fear of the outcome. Then, in that moment of panic, I remembered Mrs. Rodriguez's words. Creativity is a muscle, and like any other muscle, it needs to be exercised, even when it feels hardest. It was time to prove to myself just how strong that muscle had become. That evening, I plunged into a frenzy of sketches, brainstorming wildly, throwing out everything from silly ideas to breakthroughs. I didn't hold back, I just created for the sake of creating. Within that chaos, clarity emerged. I realized that I was not just meeting a deadline, I was engaging with the challenge, a dance between chaos and structure, allowing my mind to flow freely before reining in the ideas that resonated most. Reflecting on this journey and the influence Mrs. Rodriguez had on my evolution, I understood that cultivating a creative mindset is not a one-time achievement, but a continual practice. In each moment of tension, there also lies the potential for creativity. It requires courage to embrace the unknown, to step into the uncertainties, and allow yourself to explore. Each morning, each challenge faced, and each ritual crafted became a testament to the vibrant life I was building, one filled with optimism and an embrace of the unexpected. Chapter 3: Embracing Playfulness in Ideas, How Play Fuels Creativity. It was one of those golden, sun-drenched weekends in late spring, the kind that beckons you outside with a siren's call. My friends and I had decided to spend our Saturday in the local park, a sprawling expanse of green that seemed to pulse with life. As we gathered by the old oak tree, our unofficial meeting spot, laughter danced through the air, igniting the already vibrant atmosphere. Little did I know that this day would not just be about sun and fun. It would delve into the very essence of creativity and how playfulness nurtures it. Armed with frisbees, a picnic blanket, and an unshakable sense of curiosity, we kicked off our day with a game that was as haphazard as it was hilarious. Picture this: a chaotic blend of flying discs, spontaneous cheers, and an impromptu series of cartoonish sound effects. With every throw, every dive to catch the frisbee, and every burst of laughter, I felt a sense of freedom permeate the air, a liberation from the daily grind that often shackled our imaginations. Research suggests that play in its many forms is not just a diversion, it's a catalyst for creative growth. During our playful antics, I felt it firsthand, the loosening of the mind and the opening of doors to possibilities that felt long forgotten. As we moved from frisbee to a makeshift scavenger hunt, I began to notice the creative spark igniting within us all. My friend Mia, in her search for the perfect stick to serve as a magic wand, started to spin wild tales about enchanting forest creatures. The more outlandish her stories became, the more the rest of us chimed in with imaginative ideas, crafting narratives that were absurd yet delightful. In that moment, surrounded by friends and nature, I realized that the act of play was weaving a tapestry of innovation woven from our collective imagination. How often do we get so tangled in our routines that we forget the simple joys of creativity? This day was a joyful reminder that playfulness reignites that flame. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower on the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over our gathering, our energy shifted into a new game, one that pushed the boundaries of our playful engagement. It started innocently enough with a round of charades, but escalated into an absurd competition of exaggerated movements and over-the-top impressions. My best friend Jake, in his role as a wobbly flamingo, became a comedic genius, and we took turns upping the ante, each more ridiculous than the last. It was during this playful acceleration that I felt the most palpable connection. The laughter was infectious, the camaraderie unbreakable, and the creativity flowing like a river unbound. Play was not just an escape, It was our secret weapon against the mundane. However, as twilight approached, a sudden twist of fate struck our idyllic day. An unpredictable gust of wind sent our picnic blanket flying, scattering our belongings across the park. It felt like a sudden end to our magical afternoon, but instead of plummeting into despair, we erupted into laughter, our creative minds instantly pivoting into problem-solving mode. How could we turn the chaos into something fun? We began to enact a rescue mission, complete with exaggerated action hero poses and laughable soundtracks. Here we were, a ragtag team of adventurers, fighting against nature's whimsy to save our cherished picnic. And in that moment, as we scrambled around, I recognized something profound. Play is resilient. It transforms obstacles into opportunities, turning what could have been a setback into a collective spectacle of creativity. As the last rays of sunlight dashed across the horizon and shadows stretched out like yawning giants, I realized the power of what we had just experienced. Play had rejuvenated not just our spirits, but our creative minds. It reminded me that creativity thrives when we allow ourselves to explore, to make mistakes, and to laugh through it all. This simple day in the park had not only sparked fleeting ideas, but had reignited a fervor to incorporate play into our daily lives. I left that park not just with memories of laughter and friendship, but with an urge to encourage everyone, my readers, my peers, to embrace playfulness. Unlocking creativity is, in many ways, just a frisbee throwaway. Games and exercises to stimulate innovation. When we arrived at our little retreat, the excitement crackled in the air like static. I remember it vividly. Lucas had his backpack stuffed with board games, while Emma, bursting with creativity, brought along a stack of colorful sticky notes. The plan was simple: spend a weekend diving deep into brainstorming exercises to spark innovation in our projects. Little did we know how transformative this adventure would become. We kicked off our first exercise, a game we dubbed reverse brainstorming. The concept was a playful twist on traditional brainstorming. Instead of imagining how to solve a problem, we concentrated on identifying ways to make it worse. At first, it sounded counterintuitive, almost absurd. But as we began to toss around outrageous ideas, like intentionally confusing our target audience or pricing our product at 10 times its worth, laughter erupted. This laughter unlocked a floodgate of thoughts, and soon we started to see the actual pitfalls we had been taking for granted. By exploring the dark side, we illuminated our path toward real solutions. Encouraged by this success, we shifted gears to another game called What If. Each of us took turns proposing hypothetical scenarios related to our projects. What if our product was designed for toddlers? What if we had $1 million budget for marketing? These questions felt fanciful at first, but they nudged us to think broader and bolder. Lucas suggested we create an app that turned daily tasks into video game challenges. And suddenly, the room was buzzing with ingenious ideas. We skewered our initial concepts and rebuilt them through this lens, resulting in new features and functions we hadn't considered before. Then came the tension-filled climax of our weekend, the Innovation Challenge. Each of us was tasked with creating a prototype of an idea generated from our previous games and exercises. With a time limit of 1 hour, the stakes were high. As the timer ticked down, we scrambled to solidify our concepts. I remember glancing at Emma, whose eyes were focused and intense. The quiet hum of creativity morphed into a flurry of activity, papers flying, ideas morphing and evolving. The very air vibrated with pressure, and I could feel my heart racing as I crafted my pitch. With mere minutes left, doubt crept in. What if my idea was too far-fetched? What if it flopped? But just then, Emma shot a glance my way, a reassuring smile spreading across her face. That moment rekindled my courage, and I decided to lean into the wildness of my concept. As the timer buzzed, we gathered to present, each display brimming with the essence of our collective dreams, fears, and aspirations. Little did I know that this exhilarating exercise not only generated ideas, but also solidified our bond as innovators. Reflecting on that weekend, I realized these games did more than just invigorate our minds. They created an ecosystem of trust and imagination. They encouraged us to cast aside the limitations we'd internalized and simply play in the vast expanse of possibility. So whether you're brainstorming in a corporate setting or just seeking fresh ideas for a solo project, I hope you consider adopting these playful exercises. In a world that often demands seriousness, who knew that an impromptu brainstorming retreat could extend such a vital invitation to dare, to challenge, and to create? Shifting perspectives through play. It's amazing how a simple afternoon can unfurl into a tapestry of insights and revelations. I remember the day vividly. A group of us had gathered for what was supposed to be a brainstorming session about our community's litter problem. Our town's parks were cluttered with trash, and it seemed like we had everything to discuss, but no direction to take. The idea of injecting a bit of play into our meeting sprang to mind, almost as a joke at first. Yet, as I looked around the room, I saw eager faces, willing to explore a different route. We kicked off the session with role-playing exercises, each taking on different personas: the humorously disgruntled resident, the overly enthusiastic environmentalist, the apathetic teenager, and even the town's mayor with exaggerated airs. At first, it felt silly. Who would solve a pressing issue through the lens of play? But as we jumped into character and confronted various scenarios, the atmosphere shifted. When I voiced the mayor's exaggerated complaints about the youngsters littering, others caught on to the underlying frustrations that many felt: the divide between generations and viewpoints. Each character brought a unique lens to the discussion, and suddenly, perceptions that had been firmly held began to soften. The real magic happened when we began to brainstorm solutions, still wrapped in our character roles. Playing the part of the environmentalist, I suggested community cleanup days, but added a twist. What if we made it a game? A competition among neighborhoods with prizes for the most beautiful transformations. The idea of taking something as serious as litter and turning it into a challenge sparked instant energy in the room. Conversations bounced off the walls, and suddenly, suggestions multiplied. What about themed cleanups? An award for the most unusual litter found? As the ideas flourished, so did the realization that shifting perspectives unlocked a reservoir of creativity we never knew lay beneath our usual brainstorming sessions. But then came a moment of tension. Mid-ideation, one member of the group, a longtime resident and community leader, suddenly withdrew. You could see the wheels turning in her mind, but instead of contributing, she clasped her hands tightly and frowned. The room had been abuzz, but her silence was palpable, like a damper on our newfound enthusiasm. Concerned, I switched back to my own voice and asked her directly if she had thoughts to share as the real-life counterpart of her role. Her eyes flickered to life just for a moment, and she began to articulate a concern that had been nagging at her. What if the competition alienates those who feel they don't stand a chance? Her question cut through the exhilaration in the room, but rather than dimming our spirits, it added a new layer of complexity. The dynamic had shifted again. As we re-explored our roles, we began to piece together how different community members might perceive these initiatives. We engaged in more enthusiastic debate, considering how an innocent competition could unintentionally drive a wedge between different community factions. The insights bubbled up like a tidal wave, each new idea building on the last. What if we incorporated mentorship initiatives to ensure everyone felt included? The playful atmosphere metamorphosed into one of genuine thoughtfulness and collaboration. By the end of the session, we had not only developed a strategy for our cleanup, but also shared concerns, fears, and hopes. Looking back, I recognized that the blend of play and true perspective shifting had created space for breakthrough ideas. Where once there was frustration, there now lay unity. The very act of stepping into someone else's shoes had enriched us all. As we departed, I urged everyone to continue exploring imaginative role-playing activities in their personal and professional lives. Looking at problems from a variety of angles can lead to unexpected solutions. It's not merely about finding answers, but about embracing the shifting nature of conversations, creativity, and community engagement. Chapter 4: Understanding the Creative Process Stages of Creative Development. Reflecting on my creative journey, I'm often reminded of the formative moments that shaped who I am today. It's a landscape marked by trial, error, inspiration, and the guiding forces of two incredible friends, Lucas and Emma. Each stage of creative development is akin to a chapter in a book. Some are filled with excitement, others with doubt, but all of them are crucial in crafting the narrative of my artistic evolution. Once, as I stood in the studio, paintbrush in hand, feeling utterly lost, I realized how powerful the right influences could be. Lucas was there, encouraging me to explore without fear, while Emma reminded me of the joy in creating, not just the end results. As we dissect the stages of creative development, I want you to pause and consider your own journey. Think of this as a cozy conversation over coffee rather than a dense textbook. Each stage, from novice to expert, carries its own challenges and rewards. Initially, you might find yourself in the innocent stage, where every idea feels fresh and uninhibited. I remember my first attempts at painting, full of vibrant colors and wild strokes, uninhibited by the rules I would later internalize. But then, creeping in, comes the awareness stage. This is where doubts might start to cloud your mind. I struggled here, questioning every brushstroke and why I ever thought I could be an artist. It's crucial to navigate this uncertainty, and this is where Lucas's unwavering support became pivotal. With time and persistence, you reach the practice stage, which is where the real work begins. This stage demands commitment, a willingness to face rejection and to keep returning to the canvas day after day. Emma was instrumental during this period, often joining me and reminding me to enjoy the process. This companionship made all the difference. It turned tedious practice into delightful exploration. Through shared laughter and frustration, we cultivated resilience and passion. And while I eventually blossomed into a confident creator, I realized that even the most established artists encounter the daunting reflection phase. This is where you question your purpose and the impact of your work. I had a moment last year when I stared blankly at my latest piece, wondering if it had any meaning at all. It was Lucas who helped me see that these moments of uncertainty could lead to deeper understanding and ultimately growth. But just as I thought I had a hold on my creative journey, something unexpected happened. Dealing with creative blocks. It happened again. I was sitting at my desk, staring at a blank page that seemed to mock me with its pristine whiteness. It was like a void, and no matter how much I willed the words to materialize, they just wouldn't come. Creative blocks, they're a cruel part of the writing journey, This one felt particularly heavy, like a dense cloud hanging over my head, and I felt trapped in the frustrating limbo of a difficult writing project. As the deadline inched closer, anxiety crept in, clawing away at my motivation and ability to create. It was then that I reached out to my friend Alex, a fellow writer who had navigated plenty of these bricky paths before. "You can't fight it," he told me one evening over coffee, a gentle smile playing on his lips. "Instead, lean into the struggle. Accept it as part of your process." It was a simple yet profound piece of advice. Alex insisted that creative blocks are not just obstacles, but integral segments of our creative journey. They teach us resilience and patience, qualities that every writer must cultivate. I listened as he shared practical strategies that he swore by during his own struggles. First, he suggested scheduling my creative time, not just for writing, but for nurturing my creativity. Even if you feel stuck, you need to show up. Write anything. Doodles, notes about your day, or even a grocery list, he advised. The key is to keep your pen moving. It reignites your mind's engine. I started to see the merit in this. When I treated my writing space as sacred, it began to shift the energy surrounding my creative process. I began with tiny steps, jotting down disjointed thoughts and feelings, which slowly unfurled into potential paths for my project. Then, Alex introduced me to the idea of breaking my projects into manageable chunks. It was something I'd heard before, but had never fully embraced. "Think of it like a puzzle," he explained, animatedly gesturing with his hands. "You don't force all the pieces together at once. You find the edge pieces first, then work your way in." I realized how overwhelming the project felt when standing before it in its entirety. By dissecting it, the task no longer seemed insurmountable. Feeling empowered, I began setting small, achievable goals, celebrating every little accomplishment, no matter how insignificant it seemed. Every single word I wrote felt like a step toward reclaiming my momentum. As the days passed and I implemented Alex's strategies, I felt a sense of renewal washing over me. My block had begun to lift, and I could see glimpses of the story I was trying to tell. But then came the unexpected twist. Just when I thought I was in the flow, doubt crept in again during a long writing session. Was any of it good enough? My internal critic, that familiar monster, returned with a roar, reminding me of all the times I had failed. My thoughts spiraled toward the abyss of inadequacy, and I felt my newfound energy diminishing. But instead of diving deeper into despair, I paused, closed my laptop, and took a long, deep breath. Perhaps Alex was right. Perhaps accepting the ebb and flow of creativity was the answer. Perhaps not every word had to be perfect. That night, feeling a bit defeated yet determined, I returned to the place where it all began, my cozy nook surrounded by books and my favorite knickknacks. I brewed a cup of chamomile tea, allowing the warmth to seep into my bones. I thought of Alex's words, the underlying suggestion that creative blocks were opportunities disguised as obstacles. Would I allow myself to dwell in despair or embrace this moment? I chose the latter. As I wrote down my feelings without judgment, I realized the importance of self-compassion in overcoming creative stagnation. We're all faced with blocks, but it's how we respond that makes the difference. Finally, I reminded myself, it's okay to be a work in progress. The tension of the creative block began to give way to a feeling of empowerment, like a dam finally breaking free. One step at a time, I was gaining ground, fueled by the belief that I could push through even the thorniest of challenges. And as I settled in for a restful night's sleep, I started to dream about new ideas for my project. Perhaps this was the magic I was searching for all along. A reminder that the journey itself could be just as beautiful as the destination. The role of intuition. Working with Emma on the design project was always exhilarating. There was something absolutely electric about the way we bounced ideas off each other, our creativity surging with every exchange. On that particular afternoon, as the sunlight streamed in through the large studio windows, illuminating our cluttered workspace, I felt a spark of inspiration deep within, an insight that nudged at the back of my mind almost insistently. It was a sensation I'd come to recognize as intuition, a voice whispering ideas that sometimes seemed absurd at first glance. We were knee-deep in brainstorming sessions, developing a concept for a community arts festival brochure. Emma had her sketches laid out, filled with vibrant colors and dynamic layouts. Everything was gorgeous, but something inside me sensed that we were missing an essential element, a unique twist that could make our design stand out among the sea of creativity in the city. And then, just like that, it hit me. I vividly recalled a feature of my childhood hometown that people cherished, an iconic tree that stood at the center of our local park, a gathering point for laughter and celebrations. What if we incorporated that tree into our design? Emma initially raised an eyebrow, skepticism flickering across her face. Yet, I urged her to indulge the idea, confident in the direction our intuition was leading us. As we played with the concept, melding images of the tree with our ongoing design, the atmosphere shifted. The more we experimented, the more cohesive our vision became. It was exhilarating to watch as the bare bones of our project blossomed into something fresh and unexpected. Yet, doubt crept in like a thief in the night. What if we were just chasing a whimsical whim? My heart raced as we came closer to finalizing the design. Emma noticed my hesitation and she placed a reassuring hand on my arm. Sometimes, she said, we have to trust our gut. This idea feels larger than us. It speaks to a piece of our community. Those words rang true, reverberating within me. With renewed conviction, we decided to move forward, crafting a visual narrative rooted in our shared experiences. Finally, the day came to present our design to the festival committee. The moment was surreal, standing in front of our peers who buzzed with excitement. I felt the familiar flutter of anxiety twisting in my stomach. What if they didn't understand our vision? But as we unveiled the brochure, showcasing the tree's proud silhouette arching above joyful community scenes, something miraculous happened. The room filled with silence, and then claps broke out, resounding like thunder. We had tapped into a poignant sense of nostalgia and identity that resonated deeply with everyone present. By trusting our intuition, we had created not just a brochure, but a vessel of connection. This incident reminded me that intuition is not merely a fanciful whim, but can be a powerful ally in the creative process. It encourages us to look beyond the surface, discovering ideas hiding in the shadows of our minds. I invite you to embrace your intuition, that inner light guiding you toward unique insights. In creativity, sometimes the most delightful results arise not from methodical reasoning, but from trusting the inexplicable gut feelings that lead us to explore uncharted territories. So the next time a seemingly wild idea nudges your thoughts, don't shy away. Dive in, explore, and you may just uncover a masterpiece waiting to unfold. Chapter 5: Inspiration from Unlikely Places, Finding Ideas in Nature. As we parked the car under the canopy of towering oaks and chestnut trees, a sense of exhilaration washed over me. The world outside our city lives was one I had longed for but rarely indulged in. The weekend hike was not just a break from routine, it was an entryway to the wilderness that I hoped would reignite my creative spark. I stepped out onto the crunch of fresh leaves and twigs, feeling that raw connection to nature that had been muffled by the rush of daily life. My friends, energetic and animated, quickly dashed ahead, their laughter mingling with the brisk rustle of the trees. As we trekked further into the woods, I found myself captivated by the intricate details that unfolded around me: the delicate dance of sunlight filtering through leaves, the brilliant palette of fallen petals, and the soothing symphony of distant bird calls. Each element resonated within me, echoing untold stories and dormant ideas, waiting to be unearthed. The truth was clear. Nature was a wellspring of inspiration, and I felt more alive with every step. I began to consider how I might harness this feeling of connection with the world around me into something tangible, perhaps a new project, a series of paintings, or even a written piece. We came to a clearing where the landscape took a breath and the horizon opened wide. I pulled out my sketchbook, a small yet faithful companion I had carried for years. My friends, intrigued by my sudden impulse, settled on the grass, watching with curiosity as I attempted to capture the vibrant colors painted across the sky. In that moment, I was reminded of why I had pursued this path of creativity. It was here in nature, amidst friends and the beauty surrounding us, that the artist within me thrived. I tentatively sketched the swirling clouds, the deepening blues mixing with fiery oranges, and felt a rush of ideas coming to me, stories waiting to be told. As we continued on, each twist and turn of our path revealed more wonders: moss-covered stones, delicate wildflowers peeking through the underbrush, and the soft chatter of critters hidden from view. Each encounter sparked memories and ideas, urging me to ponder life's complexities, relationships, and emotions. I noticed how each aspect of nature was interwoven with feelings I had long buried. Nature has an extraordinary ability to mirror our inner landscapes: the chaos, the calm, the joy, and even the pain. It was clear that this hike wasn't merely an escape, but a much-needed dialogue with the universe around me. When we finally settled beside a serene pond, the water's surface like glass, I felt a shift within me, an electric tug. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, focusing on the gentle lapping of water against the rocky shore. An urge welled up. What if I infused these experiences into my work? What if I could write about the transformative power of nature? My imagination began to swirl with the possibilities ahead. But then, as the light dimmed with the approaching dusk, an unsettling thought crept in. Could I truly capture this moment, this awe-inspiring beauty, and translate it into something concrete and meaningful? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting an array of hues into the twilight sky, I realized that these fears were natural too. The tension between creation and doubt hung in the air like the last rays of light, reminding me that inspiration wasn't a one-way street. It required openness to both joy and vulnerability. Suddenly, equipped with my sketchbook and a heart brimful of intention, I knew my mission couldn't be clearer: venture outdoors, immerse in creativity, and dare to explore the depths of my thoughts. Nature had gifted me its secrets, and it was time to share what I had found. Cultural influences on creativity. My journey into the world of cultural workshops began quite unexpectedly. One rainy afternoon, while my friend Roberto and I sipped coffee in a bustling cafe, he shared his recent experience at a local art class that explored African masks. Intrigued, I asked him to tell me more. As he animatedly described the vibrant colors, intricate designs, and the stories behind each piece, I could feel the excitement simmer between us. It was in that moment I realized how essential cultural diversity is to inspiring creative thought. Embracing different cultural perspectives, like Roberto's experience with the masks, enhances our creative output. Each culture is a tapestry woven with its own history, beliefs, and artistry. I remember attending a Japanese calligraphy workshop that felt like an enlightening meditation. Each stroke of the brush was not just about what was written, but the emotions conveyed, an intricate dance of intention and movement. It struck me how each workshop served as a microcosm of its culture's essence. This yearning to learn and understand different cultural narratives fuels our creativity, allowing us to come up with ideas that are profoundly rich and resonant. As I dove deeper into cultural workshops with Roberto, I found ourselves wandering through the realms of Brazilian samba dance, exploring ancient Greek poetry, and embracing traditional indigenous crafts. It was during our Indian cooking class, however, that I experienced a moment of revelation. We were instructed to use a melange of spices. Each came with a story and a specific intent. The chef explained that the balance of flavors reflected the harmony of life. In that kitchen, the energy was palpable, laughter followed by focused silence as we mixed, tasted, and adjusted our dishes. I realized then that creativity isn't just about originality, it's about connection, both with the traditions we draw from and the people we collaborate with. But here lies the tension. Can we truly embrace these cultural influences without appropriating them? This became a conversation we frequently returned to, especially after our workshop on indigenous weaving techniques. As we sat side by side, weaving our own pieces, I noticed the hesitation in some participants, including myself, about fully embodying what we were learning. Roberto, wise as ever, posed a question that hung heavy in the air. How do we appreciate cultures without misunderstanding or misusing their significance? It was perhaps the most important revelation we stumbled upon, the fine line between appreciation and appropriation. Our discussion sparked a realization that elevating our creative practices depends not only on what we learn, but on how we respect and honor the narratives and histories behind those cultures. As the chapters of our cultural exploration unfurled, so too did our understanding of the nuanced dynamics of creativity. With every workshop, we unraveled another layer of complexity, learning to integrate and amalgamate these rich experiences into our own art forms. Each new perspective influenced our creations, but the growing responsibility weighed on my shoulders. How can I ensure that the art I create pays homage to my inspiration rather than merely mimicking it? As I left the last workshop, a mix of excitement and anxiety filled me. The journey of creative exploration was far from over. It was just beginning. How would I embrace these cultural gifts while staying true to my own narrative? And would we ever reach a point where the blend felt authentic? There I stood on the precipice, faced with endless possibilities, yet also a daunting challenge, ready to plunge into the depths of my own creativity. Learning from failure. Our group project was the culmination of late nights, frantic brainstorming sessions, and shared dreams revolving around success. As a team, we poured our hearts into every detail. I still remember the way Alex's eyes lit up when he presented the first draft. We were convinced we had something special. Yet, despite our dedication and effort, reality had other plans. The presentation was met with silence, a deafening void that chilled us to the bone. And just like that, our dream spoke loud and clear. We had failed. In the days following, the weight of that failure pressed down on us, each moment thrumming with shame. We racked our brains to pinpoint where it had all gone wrong. Was it the concept, the execution, or perhaps it was our overconfidence that blinded us? We spiraled into a cycle of frustration and self-doubt, but amid the darkness, a flicker of clarity began to emerge. In that somber space, we found ourselves gathering together, seeking solace and finding strength in one another's presence. We shared our feelings, our disappointments. It was here, in this vulnerable atmosphere, that the true lessons of failure arose. What emerged from our painful experience was more than just a sense of loss. It was an invaluable learning opportunity. We began to understand that failure isn't the end of the road, but rather a detour, a chance to reevaluate, regroup, and grow. It prompted us to take a long, hard look at our processes. We learned the importance of feedback loops and active communication, elements we had overlooked in our eager rush to succeed. Far from breaking us, failure stretched us, demanded resilience, and encouraged a mindset focused on growth over perfection. This reflection ignited a passion within us to shift our focus. Instead of asking what went wrong, we began to ask, what can we learn from this? This simple reframing opened a floodgate of insights, transforming our disappointment into determination. We realized that every setback was an opportunity for personal and professional development, a lesson chiseling away at our naivety, a catalyst for our future success. So, for anyone reading this who has faced similar struggles, let me urge you, embrace failure. Let it illuminate the path forward, teaching you lessons you'd never have discovered amidst unyielding success. As we pushed through the haze of despair, we started brainstorming new ideas, fueled by the lessons learned from our prior missteps. Each discussion was colored with laughter and camaraderie, replacing the heaviness of defeat with a vibrant sense of hope. We were rebuilding, not just the project, but our approach to challenges. With every idea floated, I could feel the momentum shift. Before long, we had a robust new plan, layered with insights, ready to stand on its own merits. It felt exhilarating, a reminder that resilience can flourish beautifully in the aftermath of failure. As I look back on that project, I understand how vital it was. It taught me and my friends that failure isn't something to be feared, but rather embraced. It is often a necessary step toward understanding ourselves and our capabilities. Each stumble is an invitation to rise stronger, each closed door a nudge toward an open window, perhaps just what we needed to soar. And so I conclude with a heart full of gratitude for that fateful failure, reminding us all that in the grand tapestry of our lives, it is often the darkest threads that add depth and richness, painting our journey towards growth and resilience. Chapter 6: Collaborative Creativity. The magic of brainstorming. It was a crisp Saturday afternoon when I gathered with my friends in my cozy living room for what we affectionately dubbed the Idea Factory. We all arrived armed with snacks, our laptops, and an eagerness that buzzed in the air, not to mention the lingering scent of freshly brewed coffee. We were about to embark on a journey through the whimsical world of brainstorming, a creative method I had always believed held untapped potential. Little did we know that our session would morph into something far more significant than the sum of its parts. As we settled into our seats, I shared a few techniques I had read about: mind mapping, the 6 thinking hats, and free writing. I explained how each offered a unique lens through which to view our ideas. After a brief discussion, we unanimously decided to start with mind mapping. I positioned a large whiteboard in the center of the room and handed out colorful markers. The rules were simple: write down a central idea and let the thoughts flow freely. I remember the initial silence, a slight tension hanging as everyone absorbed the task. Then, one by one, bursts of color began to cover the board, ideas branching out like wild vines. It was as if our thoughts were being unshackled, dancing in vibrant curves across the white surface. As we delved deeper, the atmosphere shifted. Laughter erupted, words collided, and before long, we were no longer just friends, we were co-creators. I posed a provocatively vague question: what if we could transform our community with just one idea? The energy peaked as we let our imaginations run wild. This was a pivotal moment in our session. Our brainstorming became electric. We tried the yes and technique, wherein we built upon each other's ideas without rejection. That simple rule turned barriers into bridges, and I saw my friends' faces light up with possibilities. Ideas that once seemed far-fetched began to take form. The notion of a community garden blossomed into a platform for workshops, which then morphed into a neighborhood festival. Our conversations spiraled into realms we might never have explored alone. However, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the window, an unexpected hush fell over the group. The initial excitement began to fade, replaced with uncertainty. I noticed my friend Sarah staring intently at the board, her enthusiasm visibly waning. That's when I realized the importance of clarity amidst the chaos of creativity. I gathered the group back once more, employing a structured approach to distill our ideas. We used the pigeonhole principle, categorizing our brainstormed ideas based on feasibility and impact. Taking charge in this moment sparked something in me. The energy returned, bolstered by the presence of civility in our brainstorming. We thrummed with details and strategy as we navigated the interstices of our creativity. As we prepared to wrap up our session, I could sense a flicker of doubt still lingering. Would our wonderful ideas translate into reality? I paused, contemplating the way forward. That's when I finally understood that the magic of brainstorming lies not just in the catch of the big idea, but in nurturing a space where all voices are valued and where spontaneity can flourish. Our experience that day filled me with warmth and wisdom, a testament to the creative spirit we all carried within us. I left our gathering feeling inspired and connected, but that gnawing question remained. Could we turn the energy of this brainstorming magic into something tangible? The thrill of uncertainty lingered as we agreed to meet again the following week to take the first steps toward realization. Little did we know that within each of us lay not just dreams, but also the transformative power of collaboration, building a creative community. It all started on a chilly Saturday afternoon in early spring, when I found myself huddled in a cozy coffee shop, my fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of cappuccino. My gaze drifted to the door, where I saw Emma and Alex stroll in, both brimming with enthusiasm. They were artists I had met at a local gallery opening, and their vibrant personalities had instantly drawn me in. It was a serendipitous encounter that would set in motion my quest to build a creative community, one that would support local artists like them and provide a collaborative space for ideas to flourish. Over the next few months, we met regularly, sharing art, stories, and experiences. Emma, a painter with a knack for capturing emotions on canvas, would often bring her latest works for us to critique. Alex, a talented photographer, would project his images onto the cafe wall, inviting us into each moment he had captured. I listened to their stories, soaking in their perspectives, and as each meeting unfolded, I began to grasp the importance of collaboration. We found strength not just in our individual talents, but in the synergy of our creative energies. As our community grew, I noticed others gravitating toward us, fellow artists, poets, writers, each eager to contribute their unique voice. We decided to hold open studio nights, inviting anyone ready to share their work and ideas. It was exhilarating, yet intimidating. The concept of sharing pieces still in progress was daunting, but it was through that vulnerability that we discovered deeper connections. If one of us faltered or doubted our abilities, the rest were quick to offer encouragement. The importance of fostering an environment where sharing ideas is celebrated became increasingly clear. But just as our community was beginning to thrive, a whisper of dissent crept in, threatening to unravel everything we had built. As we prepared for our first collaborative exhibition, a heated debate broke out between Emma and Alex over the theme. What had once been an inspiring partnership was now mired in frustration, and I realized that the very foundation we had built was at risk of crumbling. Feedback, the good, the bad, and the essential. I've always found feedback to be a double-edged sword. At one moment, it feels like a warm, cozy blanket wrapping you in reassurance, and the next, it morphs into a chilling gust of wind that leaves you feeling exposed and vulnerable. My first true encounter with this paradox came when I reached out to Sarah, my mentor and friend, after completing a rough draft of my manuscript. We met at our favorite cafe, one where the ambiance buzzes with creativity, and the scent of roasted coffee beans somehow made the chaos of the world feel a little more organized. "All right," she said, taking a slow sip of her cappuccino, "let's dive in." Her gentle tone gave me a false sense of security that quickly evaporated as she flipped through the pages. The first few comments were encouraging, sparking a flicker of hope in my chest. But as she pointed out inconsistencies in plot and character development, that flicker began to quake. I was torn between gratitude for her insights and the haunting fear of inadequacy. Could it be that my creation, my baby, was not perfect? In that moment, I realized that feedback, especially the constructive kind, is crucial in the creative journey. It's not an affront to our abilities, but rather a tool that sharpens them. I took a deep breath, trying to absorb her critiques without letting them crush my spirit. Sarah reminded me that feedback is essential for growth. It's like taking your draft to a mechanic. She smiled, noticing my anxious expression. They won't just slap on a fresh coat of paint. They'll dig deeper to find out what really needs fixing. Her metaphor resonated with me, illuminating the fact that seeking feedback shouldn't be about validation, but about evolving as a writer. As our conversation progressed, Sarah laid out some guidelines for seeking and giving feedback effectively. Be specific, she said firmly. When you ask for feedback, prompt your reader with questions. It's not just about whether they liked it. Ask them what resonated and what fell flat. I got it. I needed to guide them to give me the insights I craved. But that led to a deeper question. How do we navigate the bad feedback that feels more like a jolt to the gut? Sarah's next part stuck to me like honey to a spoon. Remember, your work is not you. One person's critique doesn't define your value as a writer. Take what resonates and leave the rest. Those words were like a soothing balm to my wounds. Eventually, I learned to embrace feedback as an essential part of my creative process. I began to approach it with curiosity rather than trepidation. Each critique became a stepping stone rather than a stumbling block. Yet, even armed with this understanding, my palms still sweat slightly when I clicked send on the email, sharing my revised draft with Sarah. I could almost hear the clock ticking, each second dragging on as anticipation coursed through me like a volatile current. Would the revisions please her? I thought about the constructive criticism she had provided during our meeting. What if she came back with a swirl of negativity this time? I knew I had to trust in the process. As I waited for her response, I couldn't shake the unease that nestled in my stomach. But more than the anxiety, I felt something else creeping in. The quiet thrill of knowing that, regardless of the outcome, this journey was mine, and I was committed to honing my craft. Whether the feedback was good, bad, or ugly, it was part of the narrative. This tension, this swirling mix of dread and hope, was as essential to my story as the words I had painstakingly penned. Feedback, I realized, was just another layer in the beautiful chaos of creation, and it was time for me to embrace it fully. Chapter 7: Harnessing Technology for Innovation Tools to Enhance Creative Thinking. When I think back to the beginning of my creative journey, I remember a time filled with uncertainty and self-doubt. I had all these ideas swirling in my head, yet they felt like butterflies, beautiful but impossible to catch. It was during those fragmented moments that I discovered tools and resources that would become my canvas, my playground, and eventually my lifeline. The right tool can transform vague thoughts into tangible concepts. And I want to share some of those tools that have ignited sparks not only in my mind, but in the minds of my friends as well. One of my earliest favorites was a simple sketch app that fits snugly in my pocket. There's something extraordinary about jotting down ideas on the go, allowing inspiration to strike whenever it pleases. I remember fumbling with my phone at a coffee shop, sketching what would later become a central character in my novel. That little app encouraged my imagination to roam freely, releasing narratives and visuals that I would have otherwise brushed aside. It became my visual diary, a dependable companion that captured fleeting moments before they vanished into the ether. But that was just the beginning. As I delved deeper into the realm of creativity, I discovered mind mapping software. This was where the magic really began to unfold. One particular afternoon, a friend and I sat in my living room, notes scattered everywhere, trying to piece together a compelling story arc. We fired up the mind mapping program, and suddenly, those chaotic thoughts pinned themselves down like butterflies on a board. It felt almost like a game that transformed our scattered ideas into a structured narrative. By the end of that session, we had a visual representation of our plot outlined in colorful branches, breathing life into the frenzy of our thoughts. I cannot stress enough how valuable such visual tools are when navigating the labyrinth of creativity. As I prepare to share this curated list with you, I can't help but feel a flicker of excitement and trepidation. What if these tools do not resonate with you as they did with me? But then I remind myself that the beauty of creativity lies in its diversity. What may feel like an anchor to one can serve as wings to another. I want you to explore, adapt, and find the tools that speak to your unique creative voice. Perhaps they're waiting for you in the simplest of apps or the most complex of software, quietly anticipating the moment you will choose to harness them. Navigating through the myriad options might feel overwhelming, but trust the process. With every click and tap, you're not just using a tool, you're sculpting pathways to innovation and inspiration, making the intangible tangible. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows in my once comfortable living room, I found myself in front of my laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard. My thoughts raced. What if I could integrate everything I'd learned? The ideas began to churn and bubble, and soon enough I was compiling a list of these tools. By the time I finished, I felt a rush, not merely of ideas, but of possibilities stretching into every corner of my mind. This was my invitation to you, dear reader, to join me on this journey. Don't hold back. Embrace the chaos, the tools, and the wonder of creating something uniquely yours. In a world where creativity feels like a luxury, remember, it's as much about the tools we wield as the ideas we wield them against. Digital collaboration techniques. It was a rainy Tuesday when I gathered my friends on a video call for our latest project. We had decided to work remotely, a necessity born from both distance and desire for flexibility. Little did I know, the collaboration techniques we were about to experiment with would change the way we communicated forever. Each of us was equipped with our laptops, a pot of coffee, and a dedication to ensuring that our creativity didn't wane just because we were miles apart. We kicked things off on Zoom, our favored platform for video conferencing. The moment I saw my friend's smiling face on the screen, it was like a comforting wave of nostalgia crashed over me. We spent the first few minutes chatting about our week, breaking the ice before diving into the project. I realized early on that digital tools can sometimes feel cold, so maintaining that personal touch was essential. Casual banter can work wonders for productivity and morale. As the ideas started flowing, we found ourselves using Google Docs to track our progress. The real-time editing feature made it feel as though we were passing around a physical piece of paper. I remember how my heart raced every time I saw a new comment pop up from one of my friends. "What if we tried a different angle on this?" they'd say. And I'd instantly start brainstorming, bouncing ideas off the group like a tennis ball in a match. The thrilling back and forth reminded me of our late-night brainstorming sessions in high school, surrounded by pizza and laughter. Next came Trello, which served as our virtual whiteboard. I found myself moving cards from ideas to in progress, feeling a tiny rush each time I crossed an item off the list. It was a visual representation of our creativity unfolding. The beauty of Trello was its ability to keep us all aligned, tracking deadlines and responsibilities. But as we committed to our plan, a nagging thought crept in. Could we maintain this energy? Would those casual chats and spontaneous bursts of creativity survive behind screens? To spice things up, we introduced Miro, a digital collaboration space that allowed us to create mind maps and playful diagrams. It felt almost like a creative playground where we could sketch ideas freely. And yet, with all this technology, I noticed that sometimes the energy would ebb. Moments of silence would linger as we stared at our screens, needing that spark to reignite our connection. So I proposed a fun challenge. We'd each share a piece of inspiration from our surroundings, whether it was a quote, a photo, or a song. The shift was palpable. Suddenly, we were not just colleagues, but a gallery of ideas bustling with renewed creativity. However, as the project reached its climax, merging our unique perspectives threatened to pull us in different directions. One evening, during a particularly intense brainstorming session, we hit a wall. Our Slack channel was buzzing with frustration, and I could feel the tension through the screen. Voices were raised, albeit in the gentle tapping of keyboards, and I sensed that the camaraderie we had developed was dangerously close to unraveling. The digital realm felt like it was dividing us, pixel by pixel. This, I knew, was a test. If we could overcome this moment, our collaboration would emerge stronger than ever. In that pivotal moment, I took a deep breath and reminded everyone of our shared purpose, a project born from friendship, creativity, and a drive to create something meaningful. We needed to shift our perspective. Rather than focusing on our differences, we could fortify our connection through open dialogue. It wasn't just about the project anymore. It was about respecting and valuing each other's contributions. As I made my case, I could see nods of agreement and even some smiles breaking through the tension. We found common ground, pitching ideas until the voices blended into a harmony of collaboration once more. As that project reached its closing stages, I realized that collaboration, especially in a digital world, required more than just tools. It needed heart. We learned to blend our technical strengths with our personal connections. We were not just sharing files and comments, we were sharing parts of ourselves, navigating through the ups and downs together. And as I look back on that experience, I find myself reflecting on one key takeaway. The best digital collaboration goes beyond the screen, inviting us to weave our stories and strengths into something truly spectacular. Staying ahead of technological trends. The afternoon sun streamed through the cafe window as I sat across from my friend Ravi, a self-proclaimed tech enthusiast and a digital wizard. His passion for technology had always intrigued me, but today I was curious about something deeper, how these ever-evolving advancements were influencing our creative processes. For someone who creates for a living, I mused, stirring my coffee, it can feel overwhelming to keep up with all the changes. Ravi leaned back, his eyes sparkling as he considered my words. It can be, he replied with a nod. But I've learned that instead of feeling daunted, we should see technology as an ally in creativity. For instance, the rise of AI tools has opened up a world where writers can brainstorm plots or even draft scenes at astonishing speeds. The key is staying informed and discerning which advancements can genuinely enhance our creative expression. I considered this, my mind racing with possibilities. I was already imagining using AI to generate prompts and help me break through my sluggish creative blocks. Immediately, my intrigue began to transform into excitement. As our conversation grew, Ravi shared more insights about emerging technologies like virtual reality and interactive storytelling. Think about it, he said, leaning forward. With VR, you can immerse yourself in your narrative. Imagine walking through a cyberpunk city you've created, engaging with characters you've written. It's like stepping into your imagination. I sat back, startled at how this technology could birth new creative dimensions. But amidst the thrill, an unsettling thought crept in. Would we rely too heavily on tools and lose the essence of raw, unfiltered creativity? The tension buzzed between us as Ravi continued, outlining how to stay adaptable and retain our unique voices while embracing change. Always experiment, he advised. Try new tools without losing sight of your vision. For example, if you find an app that organizes your ideas better, use it, but let it complement your process, not dictate it. As he spoke, I felt a flicker of hope that merging tech and creativity didn't mean sacrificing artistry. It could enhance it. But beneath the surface of revelation, doubts simmered. Could I genuinely adapt to these sweeping changes? Yet perhaps therein lay the beauty of creativity, the fluidity to adapt while retaining our core identity. Ravi's enthusiasm was infectious, and before long, I was jotting down notes, my fears mingling with newfound determination. We talked about setting up alerts for tech news, participating in workshops, and seeking out communities focused on tech trends. You'll be surprised at how many resources are out there, Ravi encouraged, his voice warm and assuring. Just as I felt a surge of confidence, he added, but be mindful, not every trend deserves your energy. The weight of this advice lingered in the air as I reflected on the importance of discernment in the technophile frenzy surrounding us every day. As our conversation wrapped up, Ravi leaned closer, his expression serious. Remember, it's essential to stay ahead, not just for your work, but for your growth as a creator. Embrace the unknown, but also protect your voice. You never know, but the future might hold something that elevates your craft beyond what you can currently imagine. His words echoed in my mind, a mix of encouragement and challenge that sparked a flame of ambition within me. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I felt both exhilarated and apprehensive about the technological landscape ahead. Would I have the courage to embrace these changes? I glanced back at the cafe where Ravi was already lost in thought, perhaps envisioning the next big thing. I hurried on, ready to journey into uncharted territories, armed with new knowledge and a resolve to stay ahead. Chapter 8: Experimentation and Risk-Taking. The Importance of Experimentation. As I settled into my chair at the back of the brightly lit workshop, I couldn't help but feel a flutter of excitement mixed with apprehension. Lucas, our charismatic leader, was at the front of the room, enthusiasm radiating from his every word. Beside him, Emma, with her kaleidoscope of paint-splattered clothes, was setting up tables adorned with various art supplies, everything from watercolors to clay. It was meant to be a day of exploration, yet I felt a tightening in my chest. What if I wasn't skilled enough? What if I failed to express myself? But deep down, I knew I had to push through that fear. This was an opportunity to experiment in ways I had never considered before. Lucas began by discussing the significance of experimentation in creativity. It's not just about creating something beautiful, he said, his voice echoing in the spacious room. It's about the process, the chance to innovate, to discover new techniques, and to understand yourself as an artist. His words resonated with me, igniting a spark of courage. I realized that each brushstroke or piece of clay I molded could lead to something unexpected, something uniquely mine. Throughout the day, I allowed myself to become an open canvas, ready to absorb every bit of inspiration that came my way. Emma's table caught my eye. She was working with a mix of mediums, pastels, ink, and even pieces of fabric. Watching her seamlessly transition from one material to another was like witnessing magic. I decided to join her, eager to step beyond my familiar comforts. Initially, it felt awkward, like trying on shoes 2 sizes too big, but as I played with textures and colors, that tension began to dissolve. With each experiment, I found parts of myself I hadn't known existed. There was a profound lesson in being willing to look foolish, to engage in processes that might lead to less than perfect outcomes. By the end of the workshop, I didn't just have a piece of art. I had a collection of discoveries about my creative self. As we wrapped up the day, I reflected on how to incorporate this newfound understanding of experimentation into my ongoing projects. Lucas encouraged us to keep our minds open and to embrace trial and error. Don't shy away from mistakes. They are often the birthplace of genius, he said, sending ripples of excitement through the room. With my heart thumping, I returned home, armed not just with our shared insights, but with the courage to face my creative endeavors with a renewed spirit. Experimentation, I was beginning to grasp, was not a risk, but a bridge that connected my imagination to realization. That evening, as I sat with my sketchbook in hand, I felt the tension creeping back in. What if I couldn't recreate the joy I felt in the workshop? What if my experiments turned into failures? But there, at the edge of my mind, was the nagging reminder of my day with Lucas and Emma. The laughter, the messiness, the liberation. I took a deep breath, allowing myself to remember that every creation, even the imperfect ones, held value. I put pencil to paper and began to swirl colors, mixing mediums just as Emma had, letting go of the need for perfection. In that moment, I understood that the importance of experimentation was not only in the creation of art, but in the courage it forged within me. The tension began to dissolve, replaced instead by the exhilarating thrill of the unknown. Calculated risks in creative projects. When I first teamed up with Alex on the project, I felt a familiar thrill mixed with an undercurrent of anxiety. We were diving headfirst into a territory that felt etheric, a nebulous blend of conceptual art and technology, exactly the kind of high-stakes venture that everyone warns you about but few turn down. The allure of innovation beckoned, but so did the terrifying possibility of failure. Yet in that moment, I understood that creativity often flourishes at the intersection of calculated risks and daring leaps of faith. Alex and I spent hours discussing the ideas swirling around in our minds, daring to push boundaries where conventional thought ruled. Our conversations were charged with excitement and a touch of madness as we deliberated on how to incorporate interactive elements that would engage our audience in ways they had never experienced before. The question loomed large. Could we create something groundbreaking? The answer required us to confront our fears head-on. Through careful evaluation of our resources and potential obstacles, we set a framework that allowed us to embrace risk without losing our footing. One crucial strategy we adopted was breaking our project into manageable phases, allowing us to assess our progress continually and pivot as needed. Each phase became a mini experiment, a calculated risk where we could test ideas without investing our entire future in one bold stroke. This method not only preserved our sanity, it also cultivated a sense of safety, transforming our anxiety into anticipation. As the project progressed, there was a serendipitous clarity in the uncertainty. We learned to celebrate small victories, gaining confidence in our ability to navigate uncharted waters. But as the deadline approached, a pressing tension mounted. Doubts crept in, each one whispering fears of inadequacy and failure. Would our audience understand our vision? Did we take too many liberty in design? Were we chasing an ideal that we wouldn't reach? I watched as Alex became more pensive, poring over sketches and prototypes with an almost obsessive scrutiny. Taking calculated risks had led to innovative ideas, but now we stood at the precipice of revealing those ideas to the world. Was this the moment where we would either shine or shatter? With minutes ticking away, I reminded Alex of our journey and the deliberation we poured into each step. We've gone too far to turn back now, I urged gently. Let's embrace the tension. It's just a sign that we care deeply about what we've created. It was a pivotal moment. We focused on the excitement of our audience engaging with our work, rather than the weight of potential failure. Stepping into the unknown became less daunting when viewed as an opportunity to share our exploration with others. As we prepared to unveil our project, the fear of failure morphed into a fierce thrill of possibility, one that would shape not just this project, but our future creative endeavors as well. Learning from the outcome. As I sat across from Emma at our favorite cafe, the steam from our mugs mingled with the sweet scent of pastry, filling the space between us with a comforting warmth. "So how did it go?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with genuine curiosity. The question hung in the air, ripe with expectation, and I took a breath. I had just completed what I thought would be a groundbreaking project, only to find it didn't quite land as I envisioned. Emma leaned in, waiting for more than just the surface details. I dove into the nitty-gritty, recounting the hours spent brainstorming, the late nights with the glow of my laptop screen as my only companion, and my excitement as the vision took shape. But at the end of it all, I confessed, the feedback was lukewarm. I could feel the weight of those words settle around us, heavy with disappointment. In that moment, I could see the flicker of sympathy in Emma's expression. It was a feeling I knew all too well, a tight knot of frustration mixed with vulnerability. Yet as the conversation flowed, I felt the familiar ember of resilience igniting within me. "You know," I began, shifting gears, "even though I didn't get the results I hoped for, the experience itself has been invaluable." I shared with Emma how the project had pushed me beyond my comfort zone, forcing me to learn new skills and collaborate with diverse personalities. "It's easy to get caught up in the outcomes," I said, "but I've come to realize that the process is just as rich, if not richer." Emma nodded, and I could see the gears turning in her mind. Together, we explored the importance of reflection. I spoke about the times in the past when I had let failure anchor me down, and how now I was learning to rise above it. The room felt charged with a shared understanding as I highlighted the value of extracting lessons, that every misstep was a stepping stone to growth, leading me toward future successes. "Remember how you felt when you tackled that tough project last year?" she chimed in. "You were a mess, but look at how much you learned." Her enthusiasm ignited a flurry of memories, kaleidoscopes of struggle morphing into clarity. "Exactly," I exclaimed, my heart racing as I connected the dots. Each project, each stumble, is an opportunity cloaked in disappointment. If we shift our focus from "I failed" to "what can I learn from this," the landscape shifts entirely. There was a flicker of recognition in Emma's eyes as we delved deeper into the conversation. We began to brainstorm practical strategies, the kind that could transform a perceived failure into a powerful learning experience. I shared how I'd started journaling my thoughts after each project, documenting insights, celebrating the wins, and interrogating the currents that led to setbacks. But just as the conversation began to flow seamlessly, a tension took hold. a subtle reminder that not all lessons are easy to digest. What if, Emma asked slowly, you realize you didn't just miss the mark, but you shot entirely in the wrong direction? Her question touched a nerve, and I felt a flicker of unease unfurling within me. What if all that growth didn't lead to the place I'd hoped? What if the next project, bearing the weight of new expectations, crumbled under the same uncertainty? The warmth of the cafe suddenly felt distant as I confronted this new wave of doubt. As those thoughts spiraled, I realized something crucial, that discomfort was part of the journey. I suppose if that happens, I replied slowly, it will mean I've uncovered yet another layer of learning. Emma smiled softly, and in that exchange I felt a surge of liberation. Success and failure were both teachers, both essential threads in the tapestry of creativity. Let's commit to sharing our ongoing journeys, I proposed, the wins and the wisdom from the losses. Emma's eyes brightened, and I knew we were onto something. With that promise, the cafe buzzed with fresh energy, and I was ready to step into the unknown, armed with newfound insights, ready to learn from whatever outcomes awaited me. Chapter 9: Creating a Routine for Creativity. Establishing your creative environment. Creating a workspace that feeds my creativity has been a journey filled with discovery, laughter, and the occasional debate with my friends over the merits of a punchy pink versus a calming blue. When I first sat down to write, my desk was a chaotic amalgamation of half-finished notebooks, overflowing coffee mugs, and an endless array of post-it notes that looked like a tornado had struck a stationery store. It was a mess, not just physically but mentally. I realized then that if I wanted to tap into my creative flow, I needed a sanctuary, an inspiring environment that would whisper to my imagination instead of yelling at my clutter. I called upon my friends, knowing they each had a flair for aesthetics and a knack for turning the mundane into extraordinary. We gathered one Saturday morning, armed with paintbrushes, curtains, and a veritable treasure trove of decorative goodies ready to transform my workspace. As they entered, their eyes sparkled with ideas. "Let's start with the walls," Emma exclaimed, waving a paint swatch dominated by a tranquil seafoam green. The colors we chose set a gentle foundation, a reminder that creativity should feel like a soft embrace rather than a harsh challenge. In the days that followed, the workspace moved from a reflection of chaos to a canvas for inspiration. Every item was purposeful, each trinket telling a story or invoking a memory. I hung up photographs from trips that made my heart race, quotes that urged me to create even when doubts crept in, and art pieces that sang of possibilities. I knew that a stimulating environment had practical effects. According to research, colors and decor can influence mood and creativity. I meticulously placed a small plant on my desk, a living testament to growth and vitality, the type of thing I'd often forget to nurture in the busyness of life. But amid the transformation, I realized that the process went beyond mere decoration. As friends flitted around the space, moving furniture and rearranging artwork, we shared stories of creative blocks we had faced and overcome. Luis remembered the time he had hit a dead end in his screenplay, how he had dragged his keyboard to the nearest park, seeking inspiration from the rustling leaves and passing strangers. Our conversations were infused with laughter and a sense of camaraderie, emphasizing the collective nature of creativity. By the end of the day, I was not just outfitted with a beautiful workspace. I had gained a deeper appreciation for collaboration and the power of shared environments in stimulating creativity. Once the last paint stroke dried and all the decorations were in place, I took a step back to admire our handiwork. It felt safe, yet it also pulsed with potential, each corner waiting to be filled with stories yet unwritten. That evening, with a candle flickering and a cup of chamomile tea in hand, I sat at my newly formed desk. I opened my laptop, and for the first time in weeks, the words flowed like a gentle stream. The creative block began to dissolve. My fingers danced on the keyboard. However, just as I began to immerse myself in the writing, my phone buzzed violently on the desk. Each alert felt like an intruder to my serene bubble. I sighed but chose to ignore it. I was in control now, I told myself. But as the notifications continued to roll in, I couldn't just dismiss them any longer. I felt the tension rising. What if I missed something important? Daily habits to foster innovation. Every morning, as the muted light of dawn crept through my window, I would hear the familiar chirp of birds beckoning me to rise. It was during one of those early moments, sharing sips of coffee with Mrs. Rodriguez, that I realized the power of tiny habits stacked upon one another. She would often say, "Innovation isn't always about grand ideas. Sometimes it's the small rituals that pave the way for groundbreaking thoughts." This became the bedrock of my daily routine, a blend of habits designed to cultivate creativity and keep the imaginative sparks alive. I remember the first habit she emphasized: journaling. Initially, I thought it was an archaic practice. Why write down my thoughts when I could just think them? Yet, with Mrs. Rodriguez's insistence, I started scribbling down my ideas every morning, pouring out dreams, worries, and fleeting inspirations into the pages. Something magical happened. As I put pen to paper, thoughts that had once felt nebulous took form, revealing intricate patterns I wouldn't have initially noticed. Another essential component of my routine was her concept of creative time. Each day, I set aside 30 uninterrupted minutes to explore new ideas without any expectation or judgment. I would immerse myself in different subjects, art, technology, or even nature, and allowed my mind to wander freely. That space became a sanctuary for my imagination. Sometimes, I'd prowl around the local bookstore, transferring the ideas from my head to a tangible world, abundant with inspiration. I distinctly remember one afternoon in a small corner of an old bookstore. I stumbled upon a book about biomimicry, and it felt as though a light bulb switched on inside my mind. Just a flicker at first, but it ignited a series of notions that blossomed into what would become a significant project later on. This habit of allowing myself unstructured time was surprisingly liberating and planted the seeds of innovation that nourished my creativity. Of course, nurturing creativity wasn't merely confined to morning rituals or creative exploration. It also extended into my interactions with others. Mrs. Rodriguez always encouraged me to engage in conversations that challenged my thinking. This meant seeking out different perspectives and inviting debates over coffee. One day, while discussing a recent breakthrough in renewable energy, an unexpected tension arose during the conversation when a friend presented a starkly contrasting viewpoint. Instead of retreating to familiar arguments, I leaned in, curious to understand their perspective. That moment, filled with uncertainty, propelled me to rethink my approach. I realized that when we expose ourselves to varying opinions, we open ourselves up to innovation. Just like that, a seemingly mundane discussion turned into a fertile ground for new ideas to sprout. I felt invigorated, but little did I know, a looming challenge awaited me, one that would test my newfound habits and resolve. A few weeks later, I was presented with an unexpected opportunity, a pitch for a startup aimed at revolutionizing urban gardening. The proposal was thrilling, but daunting. I was up against highly experienced individuals who had years tucked under their belts, and my heart raced as I wondered if I was equipped to compete. In that moment of doubt, I recalled my daily rituals, the journaling that clarified my vision, the creative time that birthed so many ideas, and those invigorating conversations that pushed my thinking. Everything distilled down to a single question: would I hold steadfast to my practices during this high-pressure moment? As I sat at the round table with seasoned pioneers, I could feel my heart pounding in rhythm with the hesitant thumps of uncertainty. I took a breath, thought of Mrs. Rodriguez's words echoing in my mind, and resolved to let my daily habits guide me through the impending storm. Balancing structure and flexibility. In every group project I've led, from art installations to community outreach campaigns, there came a moment when the tightrope of structure and spontaneity loomed overhead. I leaned heavily on structure in the beginning, sketching out timelines and task lists, convinced that organization was the key to success. But as I partnered with Emma and Lucas for a recent project, I discovered that a little flexibility could lead to the most unexpected and rewarding outcomes. Emma is a creative whirlwind. Her ideas often surpass the boundaries of what I could initially see. During our brainstorming sessions, I quickly learned that my neatly formatted project outline could only take us so far. One Friday afternoon, we sat down over coffee, burdened by our rigid plans. The original concept felt stale, and I could see the spark dimming in Emma's eyes. That's when Lucas chimed in, suggesting we break from our outline and explore a different approach. At first, I hesitated. Could we really abandon our carefully constructed framework? But as Lucas unfolded the idea of improvising, I felt a flicker of hope. We needed room to breathe, to deviate, to create. That day, we sketched out a rough idea of what we wanted rather than sticking to specifics. I watched as Emma's enthusiasm bubbled back to the surface. We let ourselves explore concepts without constraints. We scribbled ideas that flowed freely, unencumbered by the fear of being unstructured. What began as a daunting void became a canvas where our creativity sparked with life. The result, a mix of our original plan and new organic ideas, formed a unique blend that I had not anticipated. Our willingness to be flexible in the face of a rigid plan had transformed our project. But it wasn't just about improvisation. It was also about understanding when to engage with structure. The balance wasn't just a pendulum swinging from one extreme to another. It was more like a dance. After that first breakthrough, I realized that having deadlines and clear goals was still essential, particularly as we moved into execution. We clarified our final objectives, identified key milestones, and established a framework to keep us accountable. With this structure in place, we adapted our plans to our growing ideas, creating a flow that respected both the time frame and the creative process. As we moved through the project, I noted how important it was to reassess our structure periodically. I made it a practice during our meetings to carve out time for reflection, the check-in moments, where we reviewed our progress and discussed what was working and what wasn't. Sometimes I felt the tug of anxiety creeping in as we adjusted timelines to accommodate new ideas. But Emma and Lucas continually reminded me of the value of this flexibility. Our discussions often led to sparks of inspiration that became the heart of our work. However, not every moment was filled with inspiration. There were heated debates and frustrations, especially when deadlines loomed closer. One evening, in a particularly tense meeting, I could feel tempers flaring. Emma suggested a radical idea at the last minute, and I was torn between the desire to stick to our plan and the recognition that her idea could elevate our work significantly. After a few nerve-wracking minutes of silence, Lucas broke the ice with humor, inviting us to reconsider with fresh eyes. That simple gesture melted the tension in the room. It reminded me that flexibility wasn't just about bending when necessary. It was also about nurturing a collaborative spirit amidst the chaos. As we approached the final stages of our project, I could feel both structure and flexibility intertwining seamlessly. Our once stringent deadlines had morphed into a more fluid timeline that allowed space for innovation. We found ourselves excitedly troubleshooting last-minute changes instead of succumbing to the pressure of a tight race against time. I reflected on this intricate dance between structure and flexibility. It was a lesson that I could apply to so many facets of life, from work to friendship. This balance isn't just an abstract concept, it's the heartbeat of creativity. The sweet spot where you stand is both certain and uncharted. If I could impart one practical tip from my experiences with Emma and Lucas, it would be this: embrace the unexpected. Foster an environment that encourages exploration while reinforcing clarity of purpose. The challenge is not to choose one over the other, but to navigate that delicate interplay, creating space for creativity to flourish while ensuring you don't lose your way. Just like on that stressful evening with Emma and Lucas, you might find that the best ideas often come when you give them the freedom to breathe. Chapter 10: Storytelling as a Creative Tool, the Art of Narrative Thinking. When I first embarked on the project for our local theater, I was overflowing with ideas, but unsure how to shape them into something truly captivating. That's when I teamed up with Lucas, a fellow creative with a knack for storytelling. We decided to utilize what I now consider one of the most powerful tools at our disposal: narrative thinking. It was a revelation. Instead of jotting down bullet points or throwing around abstract concepts, we began to craft a story. Each character we discussed had their own dreams and fears, breathing life into the project. What we quickly discovered was that narrative thinking wasn't just about plotting a storyline. It was about inhabiting the characters' worlds, understanding their motivations, and allowing their journeys to guide our creative process. For instance, in one of our brainstorming sessions, we created a character named Amelia, a young actress torn between her dreams and her family's expectations. As we fleshed her out, her struggles inspired dramatic stakes for our play. The more we delved into her narrative, the clearer our vision became. The project transformed from a nebulous collection of ideas into a cohesive narrative landscape. As we continued to explore this method, I realized the beauty of using storytelling techniques for idea generation. Each narrative element not only added depth, but also opened up new avenues for creativity. The process felt like peeling an onion. Layer after layer revealed emotional truths that resonated deeply with us and hopefully would resonate with our audience. I began to see narrative thinking as a bridge between raw concept and creative expression, a way to connect ideas that seemed disparate at first glance. And as we neared the project's climax, I couldn't shake the excitement of how we had breathed life into our themes, characters, and ultimately, our storytelling. But there was a challenge looming on the horizon. Would our audience relate to Amelia's story as much as we did? That question hung like an unfinished sentence, driving our final preparations as opening night approached. Using story to inspire solutions. Every community has its unique stories, woven through the fabric of its people, struggles, and victories. I found myself sitting across from Emma in the vibrantly painted community center, the scent of brewed coffee swirling around us. We were deep in conversation, grappling with an issue that had surfaced: a lack of youth engagement in local initiatives. As we tossed around ideas, frustration began to edge into my thoughts. This is a common scenario. The problems lay bare in front of us, yet they felt as complex as a tangled ball of yarn. Then Emma shared a story. It was a simple anecdote about her younger brother and how he found purpose after participating in a community gardening project. Her eyes sparkled as she recounted how he had transformed not just his garden, but his life, gaining confidence and camaraderie along the way. In that moment, a light bulb flickered to life in my mind. Stories are powerful. They are the very essence of humanity. They connect us, reflect our struggles, and most importantly, inspire us toward change. By embracing the storytelling approach, I realized we weren't just seeking solutions, we were seeking connection. That gentle shift in perspective opened doors in my mind I hadn't even realized were closed. I encouraged Emma to elaborate further, and each layer of her brother's narrative, peeled back, revealed rich insights. What attracted the youth? What motivated them? The story painted a picture of engagement that numbers and statistics simply couldn't convey. It became clear: if we wanted the young people of our community to engage, we had to weave their own stories into the solution. This prompted a brainstorming session unlike any other I had experienced. Rather than listing problems and solutions in a vacuum, we decided to focus on narratives. We began encouraging the youth in our community to share their own stories about hopes, fears, and their vision for a vibrant community. This process not only empowered them, but it also laid the framework for creative solutions that were not just ideas on paper, but lived experiences begging to be validated and uplifted. As we prepared to present our findings to community leaders, the air was thick with excitement and anxiety. Would they see what we saw? I shared a story from Emma's brother, grounding our proposal in something relatable, something that made the issue tangible. The room listened, rapt and quiet, the tension palpable. I felt the weight of every onlooker's gaze as we teetered on the cusp of acceptance or rejection. Would they embrace the idea that storytelling held the key to unlocking innovation in community engagement? I could almost hear the doubt echoing in my mind as I concluded. The moment we finished, the silence felt like a thick fog, wrapping us in uncertainty. But then a smile emerged from the mayor, lighting up his face. He shared a story of his own, a childhood experience that mirrored our community's current struggle. That connection ignited a spark of interest among the leaders. Suddenly, we were no longer disparate voices, but a collective narrative striving for the same future. This emphasized an essential takeaway: storytelling isn't merely an art form, it's an essential tool for driving change, allowing us to harness creativity and emotion to shape solutions. As we moved forward, I encouraged the leaders to integrate storytelling into their processes, inviting personal narratives that could serve as the foundation for innovative thinking. And incredibly, that day marked the beginning of an inspiring journey, one where every voice would have the power to influence our community's narrative. Think about it. Imagine a world where solutions are born from shared stories. How many challenges could we potentially overcome? How many futures could we shape? Challenge yourself to embrace the power of storytelling and watch as it transforms the way you approach problems, weaving together ideas, hopes, and dreams into a tapestry of solutions, creating your personal narrative. When I first walked into that crowded workshop led by Alex, I had no idea how much my life was about to change. My hands trembled slightly as I clutched my notebook, not entirely certain why I was there. I had dabbled in writing before, but every time I sat down to pen my thoughts, I would find myself paralyzed by self-doubt. What if my story wasn't interesting enough? What if nobody cared? The enormity of those questions hung over me like a thundercloud, but stepping into that warm, welcoming space felt like the first step toward unraveling those fears. Alex started us off with a simple exercise: write our names, followed by 3 words that define us. As I wrote dreamer, searcher, and storyteller, I felt a flicker of something inside. Maybe it was a spark of authenticity. In that moment, I realized that the journeys we all undertake are unique, and recognizing my own was a powerful first step. In the weeks that followed, each workshop pushed me to confront the narratives I had been telling myself and others. They were stories of my failures and triumphs, shape-shifting into a saga that only I could tell. And Alex was our guide in shaping that raw material into something meaningful. As I learned to embrace vulnerability, I found my voice cutting through the noise of criticism that often clouded my mind. We delved deep into the art of storytelling, crafting compelling beginnings, navigating the complexities of characters, even if that character was sometimes just me, and uncovering the themes that resonated within our journeys. I remember sharing a particularly painful memory about loss. The words fell from my pen like shards of glass, but as I read it aloud, I found that rather than shattering the air, they sparkled, reflecting the light of shared experience. The room was filled with nods of understanding. We were all searching for connection, for authenticity, for courage. One day, Alex posed a question that struck me to my core. What do you fear most about your story? My heart raced as I pondered the layers of fear hiding behind my words. Was it judgment, rejection, or perhaps the underlying fear of revealing parts of myself that I had kept under wraps for so long? In that moment of introspection, I could feel the tension building within me, like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. Sharing my narrative with others felt like standing on the edge of a precipice, and I had to decide whether to jump or retreat into the shadows. As we continued to explore our narratives, we learned techniques to dig deeper and to convert vulnerability into strength. I discovered how essential details could breathe life into the stories, allowing readers to experience the world through my lens. Through vivid imagery, I began to paint the landscapes of my memories and fashioned characters from people I had encountered. Each word I wrote felt like a step toward reclaiming my identity and nurturing my creative spirit. By the end of the workshop series, I wasn't just writing, I was establishing a connection, a bridge between my experiences and the emotions I stirred within others. I could see how daunting it was to share these narratives, but I also witnessed the healing it brought not only to myself but to my peers as well. We became a community, bonded over our fears and triumphs, and encouraged one another to surrender our truths to the page. As I reflect on this journey, I invite you to embark on your own. Start simple. What words come to mind when you think of your identity? Jot them down. Allow the excitement to mingle with that familiar apprehension and embrace it. Because when it comes to creating your personal narrative, what you're really doing is stitching together the fabric of your life, one thread at a time, revealing your authentic self in all its imperfections and beauty. And as you weave your story, remember, it's not just about what you say, it's about how your voice resonates with the world. Open that door and let your story unfold. Will you take that step? Will you jump into the depths of your own narrative? The answer lies within you, waiting to be discovered. Chapter 11, Reflecting on Your Creative Journey, Evaluating Your Progress. As the final days of the year approached, I found myself nestled into my favorite armchair with a steaming cup of tea, contemplating the year that had slipped through my fingers like grains of sand. The aroma of cinnamon wafted through the air, a comforting reminder of all the cozy moments I had spent creating art, writing stories, and exploring new mediums. These reflections were not merely about the projects I had completed, but were also imbued with a deeper inquiry. How had I grown creatively this year? What lessons had I learned, and where could I improve? My friends and I had agreed to a friendly evaluation ritual, a way to hold ourselves accountable while celebrating our collective journeys. We gathered one brisk Saturday afternoon, each clutching our notebooks filled with plans, sketches, and fragmented ideas. We first shared our wins, no matter how small. My friend Mia beamed as she opened up about her newfound confidence in watercolor painting, an art form she'd felt intimidated by at the year's start. I chimed in with my fleeting successes, finishing my first short story collection and experimenting with flash fiction. As we spoke, a magical energy filled the room. It was infectious. Reflecting on our victories helped us understand that progress is not always measured in finished products, but also in the courage to try something new. It was a reminder that even the seemingly insignificant achievements paved the way for larger breakthroughs. However, as the conversation shifted toward our setbacks, an awkward but necessary tension crept in. Each of us hesitated, reluctant to share our stumbles. I wrestled with my own failures. Unfinished pieces that had once brought me excitement felt heavy with regret, draining my motivation as if they were uninvited guests that refused to leave. Yet, I pushed through the discomfort, and my voice trembled slightly as I admitted that I had abandoned several projects, questioning their value as I fought against self-doubt. What I had initially perceived as humiliation transformed into something meaningful. My friends, too, began to share their struggles, pieces they couldn't finish, artistic blocks that felt insurmountable, moments of self-doubt. Paradoxically, revealing these vulnerabilities created a reinforcing bond between us. In these shared experiences, we found encouraging nuggets of wisdom, prompting deeper self-reflection, and the realization that setbacks could serve as fertile ground for growth. To weave together all these threads, we developed a framework designed to assess our creative journeys critically. We proposed each other to set 3 specific goals for the upcoming year: one that challenged our comfort zones, one that tapped into our passions, and another that simply encouraged playfulness. Soon, the atmosphere shifted from solitary evaluation to collaborative inspiration. We scribbled down ideas, offered encouragement, and brainstormed strategies. These conversations not only structured our futures, they fanned the flames of ambition and hope within each of us. As we wrapped up our gathering, the night deepened outside, and there was an undeniable spark in the air. I felt a surge of excitement at the possibilities of the coming year. Yet, beneath the enthusiasm lay a tangible anxiety. Could I truly embrace this uncertainty? Would I be able to honor the goals we had set without falling back into old habits? Those questions hung heavy in the space between us like a charged air before a storm. I realized that assessing progress wasn't just an annual accountability check. It was an invitation to explore not just the horizon of my creative ambitions, but also the darker corners of self-critique that demanded attention. Looking back, I knew that facing these feelings was as critical to my journey as celebrating my successes. With that thought, I leaned into the uncertainty ahead, ready to emerge transformed on the other side. Celebrating small wins. There's something magical about the moment when you acknowledge a small win. It might be as simple as finishing the first draft of a poem or successfully brainstorming a new story concept with friends over coffee. That rush of joy, the gleam in your eyes, and the laughter shared, these are moments I cherish deeply. In the frenzy of our creative projects, it's easy to overlook these small milestones. But these wins are like stars in a night sky. They illuminate our journey, reminding us that progress is being made, even when it feels slow and arduous. I remember one rainy Saturday afternoon, sitting in my cramped living room with my 2 friends, Maya and Sam. We had decided to tackle a challenging short film project that had been rattling around in our heads for months. As we sat there, surrounded by crumpled notes and hastily drawn storyboards, we began to generate ideas. Suddenly, a light bulb went off when Sam pitched a scene that perfectly encapsulated our entire concept. We erupted in cheers, and amidst our elation, we grabbed the nearest snacks and clinked our juice glasses together, our version of a champagne toast. That small celebration ignited a fire in us, motivating us to build on our ideas and break through the mental barriers we had faced for so long. Acknowledging these small victories is crucial, especially in creative pursuits where self doubt often lurks just around the corner. It provides a jolt of positivity that pushes us to keep forging ahead. So, how can you celebrate your own little milestones? Start by keeping a victory journal. Each week, write down 3 achievements, no matter how minuscule they may seem. Perhaps you completed a chapter, sketched a rough draft, or simply found a new source of inspiration. Revisit this journal whenever you're feeling demotivated. It's a tangible reminder of how far you've come. Additionally, invite your friends to join you in celebrating. Even a simple phone call to share a success can create a ripple effect of motivation and encouragement. As we wrapped up our brainstorming session that day, we couldn't help but reflect on how vital that celebration had been for us. Not just for our mental state, but for our camaraderie too. We made it a ritual to honor every small milestone, often planning a fun outing or cooking a special meal. This approach fostered an environment of positivity and encouragement, allowing us to take risks and think outside the box. Whenever we faced a challenging phase, we would remind each other of those moments we had lifted each other up, infusing our creative process with a sense of shared purpose. But what happens when the wins feel elusive? What if you finish a project but don't get the response you hoped for? That's when the importance of celebrating becomes even more critical. Resilience in the face of rejection can be daunting, but remembering to celebrate the effort, the courage to create, is what keeps the flame of creativity alive. Whether it's treating yourself to a favorite meal, indulging in a long desired book, or simply enjoying a quiet evening with a favorite movie, those acts of self kindness help you recalibrate and prepare for your next step. Now, picture this: it's a year later, and you've worked tirelessly on that short film. You finally premiere it at a local film festival, and your heart beats in rhythm with the crowd's anticipation. After the final credits roll, you're buzzing, knowing you've delivered a piece of your heart to the world. But as you stand before the audience, the applause deafening, you can't help but recall the tiny celebrations that got you here, the shared ideas, the laughter, and the countless small wins that fueled your passion. In that moment, you realize it's not about the accolades. It's about each tiny victory that brings you closer to your dreams. As I conclude this reflection on celebrating small wins, I urge you to make this a part of your journey. Cultivate a practice of acknowledgement and revelry for every step forward. In the quiet moments of realization, when the air is still and the stars shine bright, allow yourself to feel that joy. In this ongoing dance of creation, remember that every step counts. Every achievement deserves a moment, no matter how small. And who knows, it might just be that next spark of joy that propels you into your greatest creative endeavors yet. Adjusting your creative goals. Setbacks can feel like heavy stones dropped into the still waters of your creativity, sending ripples that disturb your carefully constructed plans. Recently, I faced such a setback while working on a collaborative project that had meant so much to me. The vision was grand, the expectations high, and yet somewhere along the way, our collective enthusiasm began to fray at the edges. What was originally a harmonious collaboration transformed into a cacophony of silent frustrations and misunderstandings. It felt as though the project had slipped through my fingers like grains of sand, and my goals, my carefully outlined goals, seemed as far out of reach as the horizon. With the weight of disappointment pressing on my chest, I turned to my mentor, Mrs. Rodriguez, knowing that her wisdom might offer a lifeline. Over a steaming cup of herbal tea, I poured out my heart, a tapestry of confusion, frustration, and a flicker of hope. Sometimes, she said, her eyes steady and reassuring, the most important part of the creative process is recognizing when to recalibrate. Her words resonated deeply, igniting a spark of inspiration within me. We delved into practical strategies to reassess my creative goals, and what emerged was a roadmap for not just moving forward, but for evolving in my creative journey. The first step in adjusting my goals, Mrs. Rodriguez advised, was to embrace the idea of flexibility. I realized how fixating solely on the outcome can blind you to the joy of the journey itself. She encouraged me to revisit my initial inspirations, why I started this project in the first place. Armed with this clarity, I began to ask myself deeper questions. What did I want to achieve? How could I reshape these goals to be more in line with my current status? These reflections became vital. They allowed me to strip away the extraneous, focusing instead on what truly mattered to my creative essence. Rather than viewing the setback as a solid wall blocking my path, I learned to see it as a bend in the road. And in those bends, with deep breaths and thoughtful reconsiderations, lay opportunities for growth and discovery. I began to set smaller, actionable goals that felt not only achievable, but meaningful. Instead of striving to complete the project by a specific date, I decided to dedicate just a few hours a week to it, enough to maintain momentum without overwhelming myself. This shift brought a sense of freedom back into my creative life. As the weeks passed, I began to align my efforts with my evolving vision, and I noticed a change in my approach. I started incorporating feedback, not just from my collaborators, but from my own reflections as well. I welcomed the idea of iteration, of embracing imperfections as part of the process. The more I focused on what brought me joy in creating, the more my goals adjusted. They shifted like the seasons, becoming more vibrant and alive. But just when I thought that the creative storm had finally passed, another challenge presented itself. In the midst of my newfound clarity, I received an email from one of my collaborators, suggesting a complete overhaul of our original idea. The old doubts began to bubble to the surface. Could I remain true to my adjusted goals while adapting to this sudden shift in direction? The tension grew palpable as I contemplated not only the redefinition of our project, but also the precarious balance of collaboration where individual visions can clash. The question loomed larger than life. Would I be able to stand my ground and express my renewed vision amid the swirling chaos, or would I allow the fears of past failures to derail my progress once again? As the deadline approached, I felt a familiar pulse of anxiety. Could I manage both my creative integrity and my collaborative responsibilities? My mentor's voice echoed in my mind, reminding me that every creative journey has its share of ups and downs. The path to reinvention is rarely straight, yet it's enriched by the lessons learned along the way. I knew then that this was a critical moment, not just for this project, but for my growth as a creator. If I was to stay true to my goals, I would need courage, openness, and an unwavering belief in the transformative power of creativity. Chapter 12: The Intersection of Creativity and Business, Innovative Thinking in the Workplace. It was a typical Tuesday morning when I found myself standing before a sea of blank faces in the conference room. It struck me as odd. These were supposed to be my colleagues, a group of bright minds who had tackled industry challenges with skill and tenacity. Yet today, they seemed trapped under the weight of the mundane, each one quietly resigning themselves to the monotony of the meeting agenda we had come to know too well. I reproached myself for not having introduced a spark into our daily grind. This was when I realized that innovation, a term thrown around as the golden key to success, was often misunderstood. It's not merely about breakthrough technologies or revolutionary ideas. Rather, it's about shifting the mindset of the team, creating an environment that fosters creativity. As I recounted my first leadership experiment, which was both enlightening and challenging, I remembered how I initiated our Unleash Your Mind sessions, a series of meetings designed to promote collaborative brainstorming. It started with just 3 of us throwing out wild ideas, absurd enough to make us laugh. Surprisingly, one of those absurd ideas led us to redesign a key component of our service package, increasing sales by 20%. That realization opened the floodgates. Innovation flourished in an atmosphere of trust and play. Yet here I was, charged with lighting that spark once more, and as I paced the floor, I made a decision. I would harness the power of diverse thoughts and challenge the status quo. I prohibited any critiques during the brainstorming phase, insisting we save the scrutiny for later, and we created what I called a no bad ideas zone. The shift was electric, and soon voices rose with enthusiasm. Ideas flowed like a river, each contributing to an overarching theme that wasn't supposed to be serious, but instead inspiring. We began to feel like a team again, pushing boundaries that we had all unconsciously set. However, as the meeting wove on, something unexpected began to rise. A palpable tension, a hint of competition among team members revealing their fears of rejection. One individual, Lisa, usually a game changer, suddenly sat quiet, visibly distressed by the dynamics. I felt an urgency to address this, to ensure that everyone felt included and valued. I summoned all my empathy, sharing a personal story of failure, illustrating that every innovator faced rejection too. My honest vulnerability broke through the barriers of discomfort, shifting our collective focus back to collaboration. As the session wrapped and excitement filled the air, I couldn't shake the feeling that innovation was a double-edged sword, beautifully liberating yet terrifyingly exposing. I encouraged a diverse mix of thought, reminding everyone that true innovation needed more than just fresh ideas. It required the courage to embrace those ideas regardless of their origin. The important balance of nurturing and challenging ideas danced in the space of possibility we created together. All seemed well until I glanced at the clock and realized we had lost track of time. What had started as an ordinary Tuesday had morphed into a magical concoction of creativity, but the clock's ticking brought a sudden sense of urgency. And just as I prepared to close, Lisa finally found voice amidst the chatter. She presented an idea she had been nurturing quietly, her confidence blooming as she described it. The room fell silent, a testament to her bravery. Would they accept it? As she detailed this ambitious, cascading idea, I could feel the tension once more, everyone's reaction hanging thick in the air. Would they embrace her attempt to push boundaries or stifle it as we had feared? In that climax of uncertainty, I realized the true essence of innovation lay not just in shaking up ideas, but in fortifying the spirits of those who dared to bring them forth. As my heart raced, I knew then this was the moment that would define our resolve as a team. Would we rise together? Time would reveal all, building a culture of creativity. As I sit in my favorite nook of the coffee shop, surrounded by the comforting hum of conversation and the rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee, I can't help but reflect on those countless mornings that birthed my most creative ideas. A culture, I believe, is not just built but cultivated like a delicate plant. It requires sunlight, water, and a bit of nurturing. In my own journey, I've found that creativity flourishes best in environments that encourage openness, experimentation, and collaboration. It's not just about having brilliant minds come together. It's about creating a safe space where everyone feels free to share, explore, and occasionally fail. I recall a time back in my early career where the rigid corporate environment stifled the very essence of innovation. Meetings became monotonous, and brilliant ideas died before they ever saw the light of day. One day, I decided to spice things up by organizing a failure party. It sounds bizarre, I know, but the premise was simple. Each team member would share their biggest flop and what they learned from it. Surprisingly, laughter and camaraderie infused the room, transforming the atmosphere. The result? A surge of new ideas and a greater willingness to take risks. We began to value the process rather than just the outcome, and creativity seeped back into our work. Research backs this up, showing that diverse teams generate more innovative solutions. Incorporating varied perspectives not only enriches the conversation, but expands the horizons of what's possible. When we embrace the differences among us, whether in background, discipline, or mindset, we create a powerful melting pot of ideas. Yet, it's not always easy. Ensuring everyone's voice is heard requires active listening and an openness to challenge our own assumptions. I remember a heated discussion during a brainstorming session that nearly derailed our progress. It took a conscious effort to rein in emotions and refocus on our common goal. By creating an environment where dissent was viewed not as confrontation, but as a stepping stone to clearer, more innovative solutions, we emerged stronger. But here's the kicker. Building a culture of creativity isn't a one-time event, it's a continuous journey. It demands vigilance and commitment, especially during challenging times. Think back to the last significant change you faced. How did your team react? Did they retreat into their shells, clinging to the familiar, or did they rise to the challenge, willing to explore the unknown? The difference often comes down to the framework we establish around creativity. As leaders, we have the power to mold mindsets, to inspire individuals to view challenges not as threats, but as opportunities for innovation. When we encourage experimentation, celebrate progress, and embrace failure as a natural part of the process, we lay the foundation for a vibrant creative culture that can weather any storm. As I look up from my notebook, a wave of realization washes over me. I can sense the tension building, the need for actionable advice, the hunger for a tangible way forward. So let's get practical. When you return to your workplace or community, consider introducing regular creative retreats. Encourage brainstorming sessions that feel less like evaluations and more like collaborative explorations. Allow time for reflection and the sharing of ideas, ensuring that everyone from the intern to the executive feels their contribution matters. These actions aren't just initiatives, they're steps toward a deeper shift in mindset, a commitment to a culture that flourishes through creative freedom. In the end, it's those moments of discomfort that often lead to the most incredible breakthroughs. As I finish my coffee and prepare to leave, I can't help but feel excited about the journey ahead. Let's remember, creativity is like a fire. It needs air to burn brightly. Embrace the chaos, foster the collaboration, and watch how a true culture of creativity ignites and transforms everything in its path. The question remains, are we ready to fan those flames together? Real-world case studies of creative success. As a child, I often found myself captivated by stories, those that turned the mundane into something magical, where ordinary people found ways to weave their creativity into success. I remember an afternoon spent with my grandmother, who shared tales of artists and inventors, each with their own challenges and triumphs. Little did I know that these stories would lay the groundwork for my own understanding of creative success, manifesting later in life through a lens of curiosity and exploration. Fast forward to my university days, where I stumbled upon a group of aspiring filmmakers who exemplified creativity in its rawest form. They were passionate about telling stories that were often overlooked or underrepresented. Their project, a short documentary shedding light on marginalized communities, faced its share of skepticism. The industry was tough, and they faced pushback not just from peers, but also from potential funders who deemed their subject matter too niche. Yet, instead of capitulating, they harnessed their struggles, reaching out directly to the communities they intended to represent. What followed was a volunteer-led initiative that not only secured financing through grassroots funding, but also garnered significant acclaim at local festivals. Their story taught me that creativity thrives when you commit to authenticity and collective advocacy. Then there was Sandra, a social entrepreneur, who opened a small bakery in her hometown. Sandra had no formal training in business, but was a gifted baker. On a rainy afternoon over coffee, she shared her journey and how she navigated her creative path. When she first started, her quaint shop struggled against larger chains that offered cheap, mass-produced options. Undeterred, she focused on her unique selling proposition, using locally sourced ingredients to create mouth-watering pastries that told stories of the community. Her whimsical flavors and dedication to local farmers soon became a sensation, leading to a cult-like following. This was a perfect example of how looking within one's community to find inspiration can turn hardship into harmony. As I mulled over these compelling stories, I realized that each successful creative effort was not just a result of talent or innovation, but stemmed from resilience and connection. These two themes emerged as the heartbeat of success. With every conversation, every shared experience, I felt the weight of their journeys pressing down, intertwined with a sense of urgency. It was a reminder that the world outside my window was a tapestry of interwoven stories, yet untold and just waiting to be discovered. But amidst these tales of victory and insight, I encountered a looming question that hung heavily in the air. Was I ready to embrace the creative risks they had taken? Doubts crept in, and my mind began to spiral with fears of failure. Just like those students in Sandra, I had to confront the nagging thought that perhaps my journey was not as straightforward. It was an anxiety that bubbled just beneath the surface, whispering that the road ahead might be filled with obstacles. Still, there was a small flicker of hope igniting within me, a reminder that every act of creative courage begins with a leap of faith. As I looked back at the stories I had absorbed, I pondered my own potential. Each tangible success story had its roots in experimentation and learning from failures. I gravitated toward the idea that creativity is not a destination, but rather a journey riddled with bumps and hurdles. There lies a tension within the uncertainty, a tightrope that I knew I had to walk if I wanted to explore this path. Not knowing what awaited me at the other end, I understood that each step was essential, as daunting as they seemed. And as I ventured forth, I found reassurance in the thought that my narrative, though still evolving, was waiting to be written amidst the backdrop of creative success. Chapter 13: Sustaining Your Creative Energy, Mental Health, and Creativity. The journey into the realm of creativity is often the most intimate form of exploration I engage in, yet it is intrusively intertwined with my mental health. I remember vividly the days when my thoughts spiraled like the tornadoes that once unleashed havoc in my small town, an overwhelming force of dread and doubt. Back then, creativity felt like a labyrinth I could neither navigate nor escape. It was a place where the stunning beauty of my imagination collided with the haunting shadows of my anxieties. Those moments when I felt the sharp pang of loneliness became the canvas for my most profound artistic expressions. I found solace in painting, where each stroke of the brush was a commentary on the chaos swirling inside my mind. As I created, I discovered an unexpected truth. My mental health struggles were not adversaries shredding my creativity to pieces, but rather, they were catalysts that propelled me to delve deeper into my art. I was no longer just a writer or an artist. I became a translator of emotions, a storyteller of experiences, and perhaps most importantly, a participant in a dialogue I didn't even know I was having with myself. Research supports this instinctual understanding. Studies reveal that the intense emotions linked to mental health can serve as a fertile ground for creativity. The late poet John Keats famously said, "If poetry comes not as naturally as the leaves to a tree, it had better not come at all." His words resonate deeply. Our feelings, particularly the difficult ones, can inspire astonishing creativity. My own bouts of anxiety and depression, while incredibly challenging, have led me to moments of clarity where my work has flourished. These experiences have not only shaped my art, but have also turned the act of creation into a therapeutic outlet. But here lies the catch. The relationship between mental health and creativity is a double-edged sword. In my quest for solace through creativity, I found periods where the pressure to produce overshadowed the very joy that initially breathed life into my passions. There were days when my creativity became an expectation rather than an expression. I learned the hard way that when the joy fades and obligation replaces it, the heart of creativity withers. I started to understand the importance of nurturing my mental health. It isn't just about surviving, but thriving, to find balance and sustainability in my creative pursuits. One evening, after a long day of relentless self-doubt, I took a walk through my favorite park. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over everything, and as I watched the light dance across the leaves, something shifted. I realized that I had to stop viewing my mental health as the enemy of creativity and instead accept it as my muse. Armed with this new perspective, I sat down with my notebook and began to write, no longer fixated on outcome, but dancing with the process itself. The act of creation became a celebration, a conversation between my mind and my heart. In essence, acknowledging the link between mental health and creativity has taught me several invaluable lessons. First, it's essential to listen to my feelings rather than ignore or suppress them. Mental health struggles are part of the human experience. Instead of avoiding them, I've learned to engage with them, seeing them as potential sources of inspiration. Second, I've established routines that prioritize self-care. When I'm intentional about my mental well-being, I create a fertile environment where creativity can thrive. Finally, I remind myself that creativity isn't a race, it's a journey filled with peaks, valleys, and the occasional detours. Yet, as I share these insights, a familiar apprehension tightens in my chest. What happens if the inspiration fades? What if the shadows return, darker and more consuming than before? As I grapple with these daunting questions, I find myself standing at the precipice of another unknown. Will I take the leap once more, trusting that my creativity can guide me through uncertainty? The answer rests in embracing both my mental health and my creative spirit, acknowledging that each stroke of the brush, each written word, is a step towards understanding this intricate dance of light and shadow. Finding balance in your creative life. When I first embarked on my creative journey, I was driven by a sense of urgency, a relentless desire to produce, to showcase, and to be recognized. The early mornings and late nights blurred together into a frenetic cycle of creation that felt both exhilarating and exhausting. I started with a burning passion for writing, but as I filled pages with words, I began to realize that I was sacrificing other parts of my life in pursuit of this singular dream. It was as if I was teetering on a tightrope, one side weighed down by ambition and the other by my own well-being. Finding balance is often portrayed as an elusive goal, a mythical state where work and life coexist harmoniously. I remember sitting at my desk one evening, surrounded by crumpled drafts and empty coffee cups, feeling the pressure of deadlines looming overhead. The idea of balance seemed like a distant dream, obscured by the fog of my self-imposed expectations. But that night, a thought struck me. What if balance wasn't about perfection, but rather about understanding the ebb and flow of my creative energy? Gradually, I learned to listen to my intuition and adjust my work patterns to fit my needs. Breaking my rigid schedule allowed my creativity to flourish, like a plant basking in sunlight after a long winter. As I began to integrate practices into my routine, I discovered some key actions that helped me maintain my creative flow. I aimed to carve out dedicated periods for deep work that surrounded moments of rest and reflection. I also experimented with switching mediums. It turned out that sketching or journaling invigorated my writing process. Rather than feeling guilty for stepping away from my desk, I began to see these intervals as essential fuel for my imagination. Each walk outside or quiet cup of tea brought clarity and renewed focus when I returned to the page, something I had never fully appreciated before. Yet, just as I started to feel in control, life threw me a curveball. An unexpected family emergency demanded my attention, draining my energy and time. I found myself torn between my writing commitments and the urgent need to be present for my loved ones. Suddenly, the delicate balance I had worked so hard to cultivate felt precarious. How could I write when my heart was torn? In moments like these, I realized that balance is not a fixed destination but a dynamic practice. It requires constant adjustments, just like a ship adapting its sails to changing winds. I learned that it was okay to step back, to rest, and to allow the waves of life to shape my creative journey. In those challenging weeks, I turned to the wisdom that had guided me before, the importance of compassion, both for myself and for the process. I allowed myself to write in short bursts, setting aside the grand expectations of full chapters or polished paragraphs. The act itself became a refuge, a gentle reminder that creativity flows in many forms, even during tumultuous times. I returned to basics, free writing and expressing my thoughts without judgment. Those scribbled pages, though not what I had originally envisioned, became treasures of resilience and adaptation. As I navigated through this chapter of my life, I learned that true balance is found not in an equal distribution of time, but in following my instincts and responding to my needs. The pressure to constantly produce can be overwhelming, but allowing space for rest and reflection is equally vital. The more I embraced the process and prioritized my well-being, the more my creativity blossomed. In those moments of stillness, I discovered joy, inspiration, and a profound connection to my work, elements that are essential to any creative endeavor. Now, as I sit here amidst a riot of unfinished drafts and hopeful ideas, I can confidently say that balance is a choice, a series of decisions that shift like the tides. When I feel the scale tipping, I pause, reflect, and recalibrate. The key is remembering that creativity is a lifelong journey, one where every step, no matter how small, contributes to the masterpiece of my life. I invite you to embark on this exploration of your own balance, crafting a creative path that dances harmoniously with the rhythms of life. It's a journey well worth taking toward a place where passion and peace intertwine in beautiful, creative chaos. Recognizing burnout and rejuvenation. The telltale signs of burnout crept in slowly, like an insidious fog that rolled in during a summer night. At first, it was just a general fatigue that lingered longer than it should. I remember that moment vividly. I sat at my desk, the screen flickering in front of me, and it felt as if someone had pulled a heavy quilt over my mind. I was going through the motions, but my enthusiasm was like a balloon that had long lost its air, floating aimlessly without purpose. I thought I could push through, convinced that my determination would conquer all. But determination, I learned, has its limits. As days turned into weeks, my motivation dulled further. Early mornings became a torture as I dragged myself out of bed, expecting an accomplishment that seldom came. I often found myself scrolling through social media, viewing the vibrant lives of others who seemed to be thriving. Jealousy curled in my stomach, and I questioned my worth, my decisions, and whether I had any right to feel drained. It was during one particularly dreary afternoon that I stumbled upon an article highlighting the symptoms of burnout: emotional exhaustion, cynicism, and a feeling of inefficacy. The words struck a chord. They were almost an echo of my own thoughts. I realized I wasn't alone. Many shared this heavy burden, hidden behind smiles and social facades. The journey toward recognizing my burnout led me to the concept of rejuvenation, but it was a rocky path. I initially resisted the idea, imagining that stepping back would mean failure. Yet the more I read about self-care and the power of rest, the more it resonated. I began to make small yet impactful changes in my routine, designating Saturday mornings for quiet coffee and a good book, trading work emails for nature walks. Admittedly, these were baby steps. However, they became the seeds of something bigger. Slowly, rejuvenation wasn't just a concept, but a breathing, vibrant part of my life. I learned to appreciate the healing power of stillness. Every moment spent away from the grind was a moment invested in myself, a counterbalance to the chaos of my everyday life. But just as I felt the joyful embrace of rejuvenation, a familiar pressure began to rise again. Projects piled up, deadlines loomed, and I was pulled back into the tumult. I posted a story on social media one day, sharing my triumphs of self-care, but deep down, I was wrestling with chilling anxiety. That night, as I was up late, grappling with a never-ending to-do list, the weight of it all began to suffocate me. Could I truly find balance, or was I toggling between burnout and rejuvenation like a switch that refused to stay on? Then came a night, especially dark, one where sleep felt like a mockery. With every minute ticking by, my awareness shifted. Something inside me screamed for change. This internal alarm led to a sea of reflection. I realized that acknowledgement and acceptance were crucial. I began to list my feelings in a journal, allowing myself to confront them humbly without judgment. Every word I penned became an anchor that kept me from drifting into despair. It was in this intimate practice of writing that I unearthed clarity and the simplicity of my needs. I wanted to feel fulfilled, engaged, and most importantly, alive. As I detailed my journey, a pattern emerged. Days filled with connection, be it speaking with friends or diving into passions, nurtured my soul. I planned a weekend trip with loved ones, aligning my intentions with actions. Rejuvenation wasn't about distant retreats. It was the very act of creating space for joy and connection, weaving it into my everyday fabric. But as the trip approached, a nagging fear persisted. What if I fell back into that familiar cycle? The shadow of burnout loomed, teasing me with its familiarity just when I was starting to grasp the light. Would I be able to sustain this balance, or was this newfound joy just a temporary reprieve, only delaying the inevitable? Chapter 14: Sharing Your Creative Voice. The importance of audience engagement. Engaging with an audience is like grasping the strings of a delicate instrument. It requires finesse, understanding, and a genuine interest in creating harmonious interactions. I remember my first attempt at sharing a story online. I launched my humble blog with high hopes, pouring my soul into words that danced across the page. Yet, as weeks turned into months, my audience remained a ghostly silhouette. Frustrated, I realized it wasn't just about writing, it was about connection. Audience engagement isn't simply about numbers, likes, follows, or views. It's about forming a community that resonates with your message. When I finally discovered this truth, I began to reach out, responding to comments and asking questions. My readers felt seen, heard, and valued. Suddenly, they weren't just passive observers, they were participants in the story. This shift energized my writing and created an inviting atmosphere where ideas blossomed. It was transformative to witness my audience discuss ideas, share experiences, and offer feedback. Each engagement felt like a thread weaving a tapestry rich with stories and emotions. But there's a line between engagement and overstepping. I remember a moment that crystallized this concept for me. I was hosting a live Q&A session, excited to connect and answer questions, yet there was an uncomfortable turn. A viewer challenged my views passionately, and I froze. It was a test. Should I defend my beliefs or embrace the challenge? I chose openness, acknowledging their perspective while articulating my own. The dialogue that followed was electric. We didn't solve the world's problems, but I felt the momentum of genuine exchange. That engagement became a cornerstone of my journey, proving it's not just about what you say, but how you respond to others. It matters because every interaction can become a bridge, leading to understanding, empathy, and growth. Great audience engagement compels you to step outside your comfort zone. Whether you're a seasoned artist or an aspiring influencer, embracing openness can be intimidating yet exhilarating. As I ventured deeper into this world, I learned that vulnerability breeds authenticity. My audience began to appreciate my imperfections, sharing their own stories of struggle and triumph. We weren't merely sharing a platform, we were building a shared narrative. This chapter of my life underscored that our words, when infused with heartfelt exchanges, can ripple out, impacting not just our immediate circles, but creating waves in broader conversations. As I reflect on this journey, the stakes have become clearer. Genuine engagement distinguishes your voice from the cacophony of the digital world. In a landscape teeming with distractions, connection can be your superpower. My anecdotal evidence pales in comparison to the countless studies that validate this idea. Relationships anchored in trust and sincerity spark loyalty and advocacy. Imagine the possibilities when your audience becomes your champions, each click and share a testament to the community fostered through meaningful exchanges. But there's a catch, a challenge that looms large. How do you maintain that connection? As I stood on the precipice of a new project, the prospect of nurturing this bond weighed heavily on my mind. Publishing your ideas. There's something electric about the moment you realize your ideas are ready to be unleashed on the world. For me, that moment wasn't a grand epiphany, but a quiet coffee-soaked afternoon spent hunched over my laptop, wordlessly staring at the black screen that bore the burden of my unfurling thoughts. A flicker of excitement danced within me as I pressed the keys, crafting a narrative, piecing together the fragments of my imagination. But beyond the first draft and the countless edits lay the daunting task of sharing those ideas, a venture both thrilling and terrifying. I remember sitting down with a cup of my favorite herbal tea, pondering the next crucial step: publishing. The word itself felt heavy, laden with expectations and the fear of rejection. Could my ideas bear the scrutiny of the world? In my quest for answers, I stumbled upon a multitude of pathways: traditional publishing, self-publishing, digital platforms. The list went on. Each option shimmered with potential, but also came with its share of challenges. I began to understand that publishing was not merely about putting my words on paper. It demanded strategy, resilience, and a hefty dose of self-belief. As I navigated the vibrant and often intimidating publishing landscape, I sought out the wisdom of seasoned authors and industry insiders. Their stories echoed the same sentiment: vulnerability is key. Sharing your work is an act of bravery, a bold step into a realm where you not only expose your creativity, but also open yourself to critique and feedback. For every glowing review, there would be countless rejections, and that was okay. I had to let go of the need for universal approval and focus instead on the act of creation itself. But in the back of my mind, the reality loomed larger. What if my words fell flat? What if they were met with silence, that haunting abyss I feared more than anything else? Then, one evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and red, I made a decision that would change everything. I would embrace vulnerability and take the plunge. The fear of inadequacy transformed into a catalyst for action as I meticulously researched publishers, agents, and platforms tailored to my niche. With every article I read and every webinar I attended, my confidence grew. I began drafting query letters, perfecting my elevator pitch, and meticulously combing through submission guidelines. In those moments, as my desk became a battlefield strewn with papers and notes, I found camaraderie in the struggle, an unspoken connection to all those dreamers wrestling with their words. But as the days turned into weeks, the tension grew palpable. I hit the send button on my first batch of queries, my heart racing. The silence that followed was deafening, a drumbeat of anxiety thrumming in the background of my day-to-day life. Rejections trickled in, each one carrying the weight of disappointment. Despite the sting, I clung to the advice of those who had walked this path before me. Each rejection is a step closer to success. It's part of the process. Yet hope often mingled with doubt. Would my ideas ever see the light of day, or would they be lost among countless submissions, drowned out by the roar of competing voices? Then came the unexpected email, a tiny glimmer amidst a sea of thank you but no. It was a request for a full manuscript. My heart raced with a mixture of elation and terror. As I prepared to submit the entire work, my fingers trembled. This was the moment that could change everything, a test of perseverance wrapped in excitement. The stakes were higher than ever, and it felt like I was teetering on the edge of a precipice, about to leap into the unknown. Could my hope be the lifeline I was searching for? Networking and building relationships. I remember standing in the corner of a crowded room, clutching a plastic cup filled with a lukewarm drink. The buzz of conversation filled the air, punctuated by laughter and the occasional clink of glasses. I wanted to run away, feeling as if I were a lone ship adrift in a vast ocean of unfamiliar faces. This was my first networking event, and I had convinced myself that mingling with strangers would lead to professional opportunities and countless possibilities. But how do you even start a conversation with someone you've never met? I took a deep breath and reminded myself that networking isn't about making a pitch, it's about building connections. So instead of overthinking it, I approached a small group and introduced myself with a smile. To my surprise, they responded warmly, inviting me into their conversation. Before I knew it, I laughed over shared stories and found common interests that opened the door to future collaboration. The entire experience taught me that building relationships starts with genuine curiosity and a willingness to share your own story. But then came a moment I hadn't anticipated. While I was focused on building and nurturing my relationships, I found myself entangled in a professional triangle that turned murky. A conflict arose between two colleagues I had connected through my networking efforts, and suddenly I was in the middle, trying to mediate while keeping my own relationships intact. My heart raced as I wondered, could this be the end of everything I'd worked for? Would my reputation take a hit because of this? In that moment, the core principle of networking became crystal clear. Relationships require honesty, integrity, and sometimes the courage to step back and reassess what truly matters. As I navigated through this challenge, I discovered that not all relationships would flourish or be positive, yet those that truly had merit would withstand the storm, like an oak tree that grows stronger through the seasons. With this newfound understanding, I began to approach networking not just as a means to an end, but as a lifelong journey of learning, sharing, and growing together. With every handshake and every conversation, I was not just building a network, I was crafting a community, one that would support me, challenge me, and inspire me in ways I had never imagined. Chapter 15: Legacy of Creative Thinking: Passing Creativity to Future Generations. As I sat on the porch, watching my daughter sketch the outline of a butterfly in her coloring book, I was struck by the simplicity of her joy. It reminded me of my own childhood, spent afternoons sprawled across the living room floor, allowing the vivid colors of my crayons to create worlds that didn't yet exist. I realized then that creativity is not just an escape, it's a legacy we pass on, a treasure map leading our children to discover their own treasure chests of imagination. Creativity flourishes in environments that nurture experimentation and curiosity. It thrives in spaces where failure isn't feared but embraced as a stepping stone toward progress. When I think of the times I encouraged my daughter to let loose with her pencils instead of fretting over the right way to draw, I remember the way her eyes lit up with each stroke, transforming blank pages into vibrant tales. This phenomenon isn't just about fostering creativity in children, it's also a reminder of the importance of returning to that kind of openness ourselves. In teaching our children these lessons, we also provide them with tools to navigate the world as innovative thinkers. I often reflect on the countless hours I spent with my mentor, a woman who taught art at the local community center. She would often say, "The magic of creativity is that it isn't about perfection, it's about exploring ideas and expressing oneself." Her words resonate with me even today, as they form the foundation of how I strive to parent. But how do we establish such an environment? It starts with us being vulnerable enough to share our creative processes, flaws and all. When I think about the potential for tension between high expectations and the nurturing of creativity, I realize it demands balance. But then a question lingers in the back of my mind. Are we doing enough? As technology evolves and screens take over, we encounter a challenge far more complex than a lack of colored pencils. The digital world isn't inherently stifling. It can be a playground of ideas, but it requires us to be intentional. Each day becomes a balancing act. How much screen time is too much? How do we integrate creativity into a curated digital experience without drowning in distractions? As I watch my daughter become absorbed in a tablet, I can't help but feel a pang of worry. What if the easy access to content quashes her ability to create her own? It's a tension that keeps unfolding with each passing year. In the face of this uncertainty, I've been reminded of my own journey. I recall the times I let fear of judgment stifle my artistic process, only to reclaim that spark when I surrounded myself with like-minded individuals who encouraged exploration. What if, instead, I became that individual for my child? Could my belief in her creativity be the spark that ignites her passion? I set out to create spaces for us to explore together, whether through crafting in the kitchen or storytelling around the fire. As I watch my daughter engage with me in these acts of fun and creation, I can feel the weight of legacy anchoring us, transforming this chapter in our lives into something significant. And then, just as I thought we were fine, an unexpected hiccup rattled the atmosphere. One ordinary evening, after I had introduced my daughter to watercolor painting, she scrunched her face and asked me, "What happens if I mess up this time?" The question pierced through our fun and quirkiness, exposing a raw tension. Her vulnerability revealed a fear that I myself had battled not long ago. In that moment, I felt the weight of my responsibility. I had to reassure her that the beauty of creating lies in imperfection, that even the best artists stumble. I took a deep breath and reminded her, every stroke teaches us something, even if it feels wrong. I could see the worry lift gradually, replaced with a flicker of determination to try again. As her brush danced across the page, I understood that this exchange was more than just an art project. It was a moment imprinted in the fabric of our bond, a lesson passed down through the generations. The tension between fear of failure and the desire to create is a universal part of the journey. I clung to the hope that by sharing my own mishaps, my triumphs, and most importantly, my unwavering faith in her potential, I was contributing to a ripple effect of creativity that could resonate for years to come. But as this moment settled in and the stars began to twinkle, I realized there was still so much to explore together. Would my lessons have lasting impacts? Time would tell, but in the beauty of every imperfect creation, I found a beacon guiding us forward. The impact of creative thinkers on society. As I sit here with a cup of tea steaming beside me, I can't help but reflect on the power of creative thinkers. You know the type, those eccentric individuals who see the world not just for what it is, but for what it could be. I often wonder how different my own life would be without the vibrant hues of imagination painted by such minds. Take Steve Jobs, for instance. His insistence that technology should not only be functional, but also beautifully designed, changed how we interact with the world. The iPhone, much more than a phone, became a symbol of creativity intersecting with technology, revolutionizing entire industries. What if Jobs had followed conventional wisdom instead of embracing his creative instincts? Would we still be carrying clunky flip phones and waiting for our dial up internet? I shudder at the thought. Creative thinkers not only challenge the norm, they inspire movements. Remember the time when Malala Yousafzai dared to defy the oppression of girls' education in Pakistan? Her staggering courage and vision ignited a global conversation. This wasn't just activism, it was a creative reimagining of what education could mean for girls worldwide. Seeing Malala speak, I felt a pang of inspiration in my own chest, a reminder of the dormant creative power we all hold. It made me think, what would happen if we all pushed boundaries, rose up in our own ways, and embraced creativity in our everyday lives? Sure, it can be daunting, but imagine the ripple effects of embracing one's inner creative thinker. But here's where it gets unsettling. Every creative thinker faces resistance. It's a stark reality that I once confronted myself. I started a community art project aimed at uniting diverse groups through creativity. My vision was clear, yet the pushback was immediate and fierce. Why art? We need more practical solutions, one member of the board said dismissively. The fear of failing, of stepping outside established norms, clung to me like a heavy cloak. But how could I let that dampen an idea that had the potential to change lives? In that moment, I realized the depth of the responsibility we bear as creative thinkers, to hold space for ideas when the world might not understand them. It's this tension, this push and pull between vision and practicality that defines the very essence of innovation. As I navigated that tumultuous period, I learned that fostering creativity isn't just about spurring ideas, it's also about building resilience. And sometimes it takes the smallest spark of creativity in one person to fuel a roaring fire within a community. So as I sip my tea, reflecting on these incredible stories of impact, a question lingers. What role will you play in this tapestry of creativity? Are you willing to embrace your inner thinker, even when the world seems unwelcoming? Because ultimately, it's not just about celebrating the greats. It's about recognizing that we all have the potential to contribute in big ways. Each of us holds the power to shape society, like the ripples in a pond, expanding and influencing beyond what we can even imagine. The profound impact of creative thinkers on society might well depend on our willingness to support each other, to listen, and to harness our collective imaginations. Let this be a call to action. Nurture your ideas, find your tribe, and remember, the world needs your unique brand of creativity now more than ever. Will you answer that call? Continuing your creative journey. Creativity, I've learned, is much like a river. It can carve its own paths, bend around obstacles, and sometimes run dry in drought. A few years ago, I sat on the porch of my small cabin, surrounded by a serene forest, and wondered if I'd ever write something worth reading again. The words felt trapped inside me, locked behind a door I didn't know how to open. But then, an idea struck me, much like a gust of wind stirring leaves. I remember pulling out my notebook and scribbling down thoughts about the importance of persistence in artistry. As I reflected, I realized that every creative person experiences highs and lows. It can feel daunting when inspiration wanes. However, it's vital to understand that creativity isn't a static thing. It's dynamic and evolving. During this dry spell, I started to explore other forms of artistic expression: painting, photography, even cooking. With each new medium, I found a surprising resurgence of ideas. This was the essence of continuing my creative journey, embracing the unfamiliar. It became clear to me that stepping outside my comfort zones sparked revitalization, breathing fresh air into my creative lung. But there's something relentless about the creative journey that we cannot overlook. It's the moments of doubt that creep in, whispering that my lack of output makes me a fraud. I recall an evening spent in the company of fellow writers, sharing our insecurities over mugs of steaming coffee. One friend, whose novels I adored, revealed a writer's block that spanned years. As we talked, I realized that vulnerability in our creative struggles bonded us. We laughed, cried, and eventually challenged each other to set small goals. We decided to send one another new pages weekly, no matter how rough. That accountability ignited not just my own creativity, but also solidified friendships through shared trials. Several months passed. I'd written snippets, thrown aside numerous drafts, and allowed myself to fail spectacularly. But failure, as it turns out, is an essential ingredient in creativity. Each discarded page taught me something new. Somewhere amidst that mess, I found new stories waiting to be told. Dramatic plots unveiled themselves. Characters danced through my mind, begging for liberation. Yet with each surge of inspiration also came a sense of looming pressure. Would I be able to sustain it? Would my next work be just as compelling? Suddenly, there it was. The tap of fear, and my old friend, self-doubt, was knocking at the door once more. It's a curious thing how fear can give rise to creativity or stifle it. On that same porch, under the twilight sky, I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. I was on the brink of writing a story that reflected the very essence of my struggles. But what if it fell flat? The worry nagged not just at my confidence, but at my spirit. Yet I knew I had to harness that fear, not run from it. I had learned to transform that anxiety into motivation. The crux of continuing one's creative journey often resides in recognizing fear for what it is, not a wall, but a bridge. Each step into the unknown becomes a testament to resilience. With this feeling boiling inside me, I grabbed my pen and bravely launched into the pages. Ultimately, the journey of creativity is as much about the process as the product. Every artist, no matter their experience level, can take comfort in knowing that each stumble, each failure, is a stepping stone. As I write this, I realize that my story continues to unfold. Each day holds the potential to create something new, and as long as I remain open to exploration and growth, I will move forward. And just as I neared completion of my latest work, the door to inspiration cracked open ever so slightly, reminding me of the beauty found in perseverance and vulnerability, the two keys to unlocking an enduring creative journey. Thank you for joining us on this creative journey through creative thinking, unlocking your inner innovator. I hope this audiobook has sparked new ideas and inspired you to explore your creativity with confidence. Remember, the world needs your unique perspective and innovation. Keep nurturing your creativity, stay curious, and continue to share your voice. If you enjoyed this audiobook, please consider leaving a review and sharing it with others. Let's keep the creative momentum going. Until next time, stay inspired and keep innovating. Let's continue to make a difference, one creative thought at a time.